Alrighty then, since it's 5 o'clock, I now call to order the July 15th, 2020 Board Workshop of the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees. A quorum of board members is present. I will note that Mr. Taggart is absent and Mr. Flora is on his way. We are meeting this evening under authority of Texas Government Code Section 551.045, and with the authority of the Governor's Office via video conference to advance the public health goal of limiting face-to-face meetings to slow the spread of coronavirus, which is also COVID-19. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our administration and technology staff for making this technology possible for the board to meet in this manner. This meeting is being live streamed on the board's YouTube channel and recorded. The recording will be made available to the public. Additionally, members of the public who seek to exercise their right under state law to address the board on an item on the agenda for tonight's meeting have the ability to do so in the manner listed on the notice for this meeting. At this time, we'll address public comments. As I noted a moment ago, to comment on an item on the agenda for today's board member meeting, members of the public were instructed to submit their comments to be read into record. Elizabeth, would you please read any comments that were received from members of the public?
No comments were submitted.
Thank you. Then we will move directly into our board workshop, which would be planning for the 2020-21 school year. And Dr. Smith, I'll hand that over to you if you're the person who's going to get us started.
Yes, ma'am. So, Madam President, members of the board, thank you for your time tonight. I want to open this meeting and publicly thank our trustees. I want you to know I was thinking back a little bit earlier today, and my first official board meeting in Belton ISD was March, I believe, the 17th, and it was under unusual circumstances. And since that time, I know you all have had a whole host of unusual circumstances as trustees. I promise that I did not bring this, but we are working to manage through these things. But tonight is a special workshop session specifically to talk about our planning for the upcoming school year. And I thank our board for being willing to do this because I think it's important. We have changing, interesting times right now, and I appreciate your willingness and your effort in listening in and being thought partners with us in all of this. A couple of things real quickly before I turn it over to our amazing team that's going to talk to us tonight on many of these items. I wanted to make sure that I framed some things for the presentation tonight. I need to let our public and our board know that it was 8 days ago today that we received the guidance from TEA. Not 2 months ago, not 3 months ago, it was 8 days ago when we received TEA's guidance for health and safety protocols for opening school for the 2020-2021 school year. The guidance that we received at that time did not address any social distancing. There was no class size requirements. There were no requirements for number of kids on the bus. It didn't give us any guidance regarding that. The guidance did not say that schools had to use masks. The guidance did say that schools had to offer 5 days a week of face-to-face instruction and a virtual option for families. So that's what the guidance said as of 8 days ago. And it did not allow for any kind of a phased-in approach or hybrid plan to address the face-to-face instruction. 3 weeks ago, if you had asked me where I would be on this topic on this day, I would have said, we can do this easy and we're ready to do it in Belton ISD. And I need you to know, we are still ready to do whatever we need to do for kids in Belton ISD, and we will continue to do that. But I will tell you that things have changed and shifted a lot in the last 3 weeks. And so tonight, you're going to hear a lot of information based on current TEA guidance, and that's the plan that we have created. But we have been planning through multiple phases and multiple scenarios just because things are changing so rapidly. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that things are changing even in the last 24 to 48 hours across the state of Texas regarding some of these things. So I need our community to know that while I know some other districts have put out plans about what their instructional plan would be, Our approach has been a little bit different, and it has been a little bit different because of the fluidity of guidance that we've been receiving from the state in all of this. We did not rush to get a plan out, nor to get a survey out to our community, because we had the feeling that things would change, and they have been indeed changing. And so tonight is our best effort of talking about what our plan would be given the current TEA guidance and how we're going to get feedback from our community and talk about our next steps in a changing landscape. I also need the public and our board to know the TEA guidance that was issued last week, I do not think adequately takes into account the health and safety concerns of many of our teachers, staff members, and some of our community. That is not a judgment in any way, shape, or form, but it is just the way I feel about the guidance. I don't think it addressed some of the concerns that I have heard from our community and from some of our staff. I also need everybody to know that the draft plans tonight that we're going to talk about in depth are exactly that. They're draft plans that could change depending on guidance from our governor, depending on other guidance that we may receive from other elected officials or executive orders that we may receive from other elected officials. And while I know that our community wants a very clear, concrete plan right now, trust me, I would like that too. I need everyone to know that we do have certain guidelines that we're going to have to follow along the way, and we will continue to evolve, be flexible and adaptable, and meet those guidelines. But I also want to point out that the things that we have received at this point, I do not think adequately support a safe and effective entry for our staff in addressing some of those concerns. All along, we've stated that our planning process is planning for everything that we possibly can so that we can be flexible. And that flexibility is based in one thing, and that's a focus on our kids, because we know that face-to-face instruction in a manner that provides safety and assurance for our staff and our families would be the best model that we possibly could have. And so I just need you to know that our goal is always that, but we will listen to the direction that we are given by the state, and we will continually work to evolve according to that direction. As I turn it over, I also want to acknowledge one thing, and that's our team that's on the line tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Melinda Golden real quick. She's been helping us spearhead some of these planning efforts. And I just want to point out, this is her first board meeting that she's actually working with you all face-to-face on. And it's in the middle of topics like this. But I also want to point out Todd and Deanna and Mike and Elizabeth and Sam and all of the other people on this line that are working on a daily basis to try and figure these things out. Board, I have shared with you some of the sample documents that we receive. They usually come in 6, 9, 12-page formats, and they change about every 2 days. And I couldn't be more thankful for the team that's on this call that are helping plan through all of these different scenarios, because as you know, it changes, it's detailed, and there's a lot at stake in all of it. So I want to publicly thank everybody on this call tonight, our board members and our administrative team. Our patience from our teachers and our community is well appreciated in all of this. And I'm going to turn it over to Melinda to get started.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you the work of an amazing team. And as Matt has shared, I'm just here to represent the work of our principals, our district staff, and the voice of teachers as we've gathered input through this process. And so really our purpose tonight is to engage in a conversation with you. We need your feedback on the plans that we're going to talk to you about this evening. And so this evening is a great opportunity to engage in questions and dialogue as we dig into our planning efforts. So we're going to launch our slides, and as they're doing that, I want to share with you some of the key areas that we're going to cover in our presentation. Key areas will be, first and foremost, we're going to start with our guidance that we've received from the Texas Education Agency. And if you'll advance to, I believe it's our second, next slide, please. As Dr. Smith shared, we have received guidance from the Texas Education Agency. And so the plans you're going to hear about this evening reflect the most current guidance that we received approximately 8 days ago. In that guidance, they also provided some key definitions to some terms that are important for us to launch this presentation with and with an understanding. And as we dig deeper into this presentation this evening, we'll be hitting more highlights on why those key terms are important. We're going to talk about our approach. What was our approach to our planning process? What was our design thinking process that we brought to this incredibly challenging environment that we find ourselves in? We're also going to share with you a high-level overview of the various scenarios that we've been designing around. And my friends Todd and Mike and Deanna are going to go into greater depth into those scenarios around exceptional learning experiences for students, as well as operational considerations, and what we need to do and want to do to support our teachers and our staff through these challenging times. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to discuss next steps with you. So we'll go to our next slide. We're going to start with some of the guidance that we've received. As Matt has shared with you, approximately 8 days ago, we received guidance that we would be having a face-to-face option for our families that want to send their children to school. That option would be 5 days a week, full day school for our students interested in coming back, which of course is the desire we all have. We all are in this business because we want to support our students and see our students. But that was their guidance they gave to us. While we want to see our students, we want to make sure that we do this in a way that's safe for our students and our faculty. They also gave us guidance that we would be required to have an at-home learning option for our parents that they would register their children for. They gave us guidance that we could establish an at-home learning option for a minimum of a full grading period, could be longer at the will of our parents, but at a minimum, it would be a grading period at a time. They also explained to us that STAR would still be required. So we will still be expected to administer our high stakes accountability testing. Although they did extend the window, we would still be held accountable to that data. Our next slide, there are a couple of additional items that TEA provided for us. As I shared earlier, one is defining some terms for us. So close contact has been defined by TEA through guidance from our health authorities. And so we're going to talk about what that means, and later in the presentation, why that's important that we know that, as well as define terms such as synchronous and asynchronous and the impact on attendance in those different scenarios. As Matt said, there were no limits to class size or bus capacity. They did just recently, after those 8 days ago, they came out and said that we now have a 3-week phase-in option. That guidance came in very late, so we're in the process of exploring what could that mean for Belton ISD. That came later in the week, this past week. And they gave us guidance on student attendance. Student attendance will be required no matter the scenario, whether a student's participating in at-home learning, whether they're at school face-to-face. We will be taking attendance as we move forward into the school year. They did provide a grace period for that, but they are have set the expectation that we have systems in place to take attendance no matter the phase that we are in our school district.
Board, if I could interject real quick, 2 things. I want you to know, we do know in our hearing that we have various comments being made out there about TEA changing the guidance as recently as this afternoon. Our job isn't to present tonight on hypothetical guidance that they have not sent to us yet. And I just want to comment on that because example is student attendance. There is a tweet out there and it said something about how TEA is going to change the guidance on student attendance. But our feeling tonight was to make sure that we stuck with what they have given us as school districts for guidance and not to play in the hypothetical world right now. Again, if we are given additional guidance, we will respond accordingly, and we believe we've been planning accordingly. So I just wanted to clarify that. I also wanted to make sure that you all feel very comfortable. If you have questions along the way, this is a workshop setting, and we want those questions because your minds are going to help us be better prepared for the start of the school year. So please feel free to jump in anytime you want on any of these things.
So on that note, May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is Chris. It's in reference to no limits. So I did go through the wonderful 8 or 9 page document that came out, several days ago at this point. And while I don't think I read that there were specific like hard count limits, I thought there were space limits that were implemented, right? And something to the magnitude of like 45 square feet per student or something like that, right? Am I wrong, or has that changed, or?
We know that they had given us guidance on class size and bus capacity for summer school.
Okay.
We were not given those limits for moving into the fall semester.
Okay.
That doesn't mean we're not going to make some recommendations on limits as we talk through various phases. But we did not receive the same limits and expectations that we were given this summer.
Okay.
And I think, Chris, one of the good clarifications in all of this is TEA throughout this whole process has provided some recommendations for people to follow, but not specific guidance saying districts have to follow it or mandates. And I think one of the things that definitely is out there is this notion of 6 feet between kids and how many square feet do you have to actually have in a classroom. The guidance that we have from TEA as of last week did not say you have to have 6 feet in between your kids and you have to space things out accordingly per classroom. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, no, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. In our next slide, the other thing that TEA provided some clarity on is around some key terms. And so close contact, they defined for us last week. And in this slide, you'll see that there's a key piece I want to point out to this. They're defining close contact as being within 6 feet for a cumulative duration of 15 minutes or being directly exposed to infectious secretion while not wearing a mask. And so the not wearing a mask is going to be key. So we'll be talking more about masks later in the presentation, but that part was something they clarified for us this past week. They also talked about when individuals are presumed to be infectious. They talked about at least 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms, or in the case of asymptomatic individuals that are lab confirmed positive, then you're presumed infectious 2 days prior to that confirming the lab test. And so that's going to come into play later in our presentation when we're talking about masks and we're talking about how we'll handle close contact situations should we have students or staff either presumed infectious or have tested positive for COVID. So we'll come back to that definition later in our presentation. They also define synchronous and asynchronous learning. So as I said earlier, virtual learning has to be an option for our families. The Texas Education Agency has made provisions where it can be asynchronous, meaning that teachers provide the materials. They could provide video lessons. They provide just work for students to do, but it doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face. And it doesn't have to be where a teacher has their entire class online and he or she is instructing simultaneously. But that pre-recorded videos, those kind of things would be considered asynchronous learning. The synchronous learning is also an option, but it requires two-way, real-time, live virtual instruction. And so certainly that is an option for school districts as well. There are attendance requirements and why this becomes important. And again, as Matt shared, that could change as early as tomorrow when we have our commissioner's call. But the last guidance we received is that attendance would be taken daily. If a student's in an online at-home learning environment, it could happen in a synchronous situation where teachers have all the students log in at a certain time, take attendance right then at a set time. It can also happen in an asynchronous model, and that they gave us some criteria in which attendance could be taken in asynchronous setting, which basically it is a teacher can assume a student's present if they're seeing progress within their learning management system, meaning within Google Classroom, Schoology, those tools. They could actually do a face-to-face synchronous opportunity for attendance purposes or talk on the phone with students, or students could turn in work on a particular day and the submission of work be considered for attendance purposes. Again, that's our latest guidance. We suspect this is going to evolve and change, could be again as early as tomorrow. But just wanted to clarify the synchronous and asynchronous part. And Deanna's going to talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, about what that really looks like, as well as talking about some requirements we have for submitting a plan regarding this to TEA. So our next part, oh, yes.
So one point on that, in reading through it and then talking to Dr. Smith, because we are on the topic here of the virtual learning. And we do have to follow the guidance of TEA. There's no doubt. That doesn't mean we have to agree with it. And I doubt what I'm going to say is going to get to them. But one thing that needs to be pointed out is most people, I think, would agree that at least going into this semester, with all of the unknowns, that a blended environment is probably where we're going to be headed, where we would have different kids coming in different days, where we would have not only virtual learning, but we would also have in-class learning. But am I correct in saying that in their original, what we saw them put out, it was all or nothing? It was either they're in the classroom or they're virtual, which doesn't give us the ability to build a system to work around that. Is that correct?
Well, they gave us the option, is an interesting word. We were required to have an at-home learning option and a face-to-face option. So both of those were required.
But not a blended to where like an MT days or something like that, where some kids come one day, another kids come another, so that a kid is getting virtual and they're getting that at the same time. That's not an option right now, correct?
Well, that is certainly an option that we are planning for.
But TEA has not let us do that yet, right? They haven't come out and said, we'll accept that.
The commissioner made a comment recently on a call that said that is not for the faint of heart, I believe was the quote.
Okay.
But I believe as long as we had the face-to-face option and the at-home learning option, we could consider an additional option. The complexity of doing all of those simultaneously that's why he made the comment, not for the faint of heart, but he didn't exclude it. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, I want to clarify. I think you hit it right on the head. So Jeff, to be really clear, the commissioner did. He basically said to us, yeah, good luck trying that. And, we'll see if you can pull it off. They did not give us the authority to say, we are going to have all first graders on this day and all second graders stay home. In fact, he said, we actually have to offer face-to-face every day for every kid that wants it. And so it's not an either or on this one. He said you could offer it as an option, but you still have to offer the other two as well. And so I want to be really clear on that one. The challenge with that is it all depends on the number of kids and who wants what. And we weren't able to, as a school district, say, this is what we believe is in the best interest of our learners that need us the most. They basically said, you have to offer 5 days a week face-to-face, and you have to offer an entirely virtual option, and anything in between, good luck on.
Okay.
And so the next part, I just want to give you a big picture, a big overview of our design process. Our approach, I think, has been unique to our school system in that it has been deeply rooted in the values of our school system and our community. And so on our next slide, it just provides a big picture of our process. Everything was anchored in our values and our commitments to our students, our staff, and our community. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you what our approach was to this work, how we listen to the voices of our community, teachers, internal and external stakeholders in the design process. We'll be talking about our various scenarios. I'm going to give a very high overview of them. And then again, the team's going to go into much greater detail. And so in the next slide, just kicking that off, and just a reminder, and I've heard Matt say this every time I've heard him speak. When he came to Belton and started listening to the community, internal and external, it was very clear there were values we hold very dearly. One, we're going to treat each other kindly through this work. Kindness is important in our actions. Clarity in our communication was very important to our community and continues to be, and unity and purpose. And so I wanted to highlight this because when we started the design work, we started with that notion, well, all of these values, but particularly with the value of unity and purpose, that we were committed to providing and designing around exceptional learning experiences, whether students are at home learning or whether students are face-to-face. That was where we started our work, and that was for each and every student. So equity was very important in this planning process. Safety was very important. And I put the word agility there because that has really had to describe this work. And being agile, meaning we are not changing direction. We are going to stay with our focus on our values, but we might have to pivot strategy just as we've been talking tonight. And again, as the guidance continues to come in and as the landscape changes, we will have to pivot and be agile through this. And so we started really anchoring in these values. And then the next slide just shows, I wanted you to see big picture, our approach to this, to all of the design work we've been doing. And really it started with input. In a minute, Elizabeth's going to speak and talk about the ways in which we gathered input. And I really want to highlight, we mean something different from input and feedback. Tonight, we're seeking feedback. Prior to this, we gathered the voices of our community, our teachers, our staff, and we used those voices as we also researched what TEA shared, local and state health authorities, but we also paid attention to, connected with our surrounding school districts, and quite frankly, districts across this nation we have stayed in contact with, just as we were researching our various scenarios. We brought all of that information into our brainstorming sessions. We told everyone no idea is a bad idea. This is the Apollo 13 moment where we're throwing everything on the table that we have available to us, and we're going to figure out how to put the round peg in the square peg in the round hole. So we did a lot of brainstorming. No idea is a bad idea. And through that work, we designed multiple iterations, and those iterations led to the scenarios that I'm going to talk with you tonight. We are at the phase of our process where you see the red dot. You are the first step in our community, having this workshop publicly. We want to begin gathering feedback. And so later in the presentation, Elizabeth is going to talk about our survey and our processes for gathering feedback. But we wanted Elizabeth to spend a little bit of time talking about the input that went into these designs.
Thank you, Melinda. Good evening, trustees. I want to acknowledge first and foremost that we have heard from teachers and staff across the district that almost as soon as we launched extended learning opportunities and operations during the closure last spring, our departments, our leaders, our teachers began their own individual design thinking processes of how they would iterate and improve and build on the experiences we all faced last spring. But officially starting this process for planning for 2020-2021, we kicked off with a community thought exchange back in May. I know that seems like oh so long ago, but it was just a few short 2 months ago. We had over 1,000 participants share 968 thoughts with more than 42,000 ratings on those thoughts to help us figure out what those top themes were. 76% or almost 800 of those participants were self-reported as parents, with 10% of those participating indicating they were employees. The common themes we heard back in May of what we would need to keep in mind as we planned for the new school year were the need for increased hand washing and related supplies, along with cleaning and other sanitizing related thoughts. A desire for choice and flexibility when it came to attendance. The concern of working parents versus those more concerned about their students' health and what returning to school might mean for them. Opposition to STAR and other standardized tests and the pressure that our students and our parents feel to those different sorts of assessment measures. And then also an overwhelming amount of appreciation for the spring response, along with ways that we could improve that learning experience based on what we all faced together. in March through May. The second major input opportunity that we have recently facilitated were in July. On the 1st and 2nd, we held teacher input events through Zoom. Following an overview of where we were in the planning process, looking at multiple scenarios, we used Thought Exchange again to facilitate discussion with over 130 teachers on each one of those Zooms as we continue to seek teacher and staff voice in our planning efforts. The top themes that we heard from our teachers in those two events were understandable health and safety concerns, staffing logistics such as leave and the availability of subs, how necessary planning and preparation was, that dedicated time to allow them to support student learning, especially in the different modalities. We also heard important suggestions and other ideas on how to provide and improve on exceptional learning experiences. Thoughts shared during both of those input opportunities have informed the planning to this point, what you're hearing tonight. And moving forward, we look forward to seeking feedback through several ways that we'll share more with you about in the end of this presentation as next steps.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about the scenarios that we have been designing around. So a couple of things I want to say before we get into this. I'm going to provide a very high-level overview of this, and then next I'll turn it over to Deanna. She's going to begin the conversation on, so what does exceptional learning experiences look like in these scenarios? We'll talk about exceptional operational services, transportation meal services, custodial services. So we're going to really dive deep into these, but I'm going to provide you with a big picture overview. The other thing I'd like to say before I start getting into the details is this is not meant to convey that we thought we would start at, let's say, scenario 1 or phase 1, and that there would be a time where, oh, we may need to step into 2, and then a time where we may need to step into 3. It is not linear. We suspect we'll be in several of these scenarios simultaneously. We might start out in one phase and have to quickly pivot to another. And that's why we didn't plan for just 2 scenarios. We really wanted to make sure that we were going to be agile as a system and be able to be flexible based on the ever-changing landscape that we're facing right now. So with that in mind, again, I'm going to give a high level overview, and then we're going to really dive into the details of this. First of all, I'll start with face-to-face scenario. That's that red dot. It's intentionally red. That's our big red community, and that's where we would love to get back to, right? And this is where safety is, the COVID situation has improved. We get back to school. We're face-to-face. We're assessing academic and social emotional needs of our students, and where we've learned some things along the way. We've learned, my daughter will die that I'm about to do this, but maybe we've learned, like my daughter, who would go and wash her hands when she was little and would just run her hands under the sink and think she washed her hands. You know, now maybe we've learned some more things about soap and taking our time and thorough hygiene. You know, maybe we've learned some things about really the power of technology and how technology can be a catalyst for exceptional learning experiences. So this face-to-face scenario is really a time where perhaps there's a vaccine and COVID is kind of in our past, right? But we know we'll get to that point eventually. So we wanted to talk about what we needed to do and think about in that particular scenario. But then we look at, it's number 2, 3, and 4. Those are phases of a face-to-face scenario as well, but it's with varying degrees of safety precautions. So when you look at 2, for example, that's a face-to-face with some safety precautions. That's where our cleaning protocols have increased frequency than what we have normally done in the past. And I think our school systems have done an incredible job. We've dealt with flu before. We know how to clean and take care of those situations. But in scenario 2, we're increasing those protocols. Maybe we're encouraging masks unless 6 feet distancing could be maintained. We're increasing hand washing. We're sanitizing common locations and buses more frequently. But then we go into 3. In 3, it says enhance. That's where we're probably talking about where masks are required, where we are required to follow executive orders of our governor, and we're wearing masks. We're increasing hand washing frequencies even more so. We're eliminating gatherings in common areas. We're modeling spacing with markers like you've seen in H-E-B and different grocery stores. We're limiting cafeteria capacity at this point. We're increasing the sanitizing of buses. Instead of doing our normal at the end of the day, we're doing between every run potentially. And, you know, then we move into hybrid. And when we talk about hybrid, we're talking about hybrid schedules. Now we're talking about we have to limit the number of students at school. And so that's where we're considering things like we bring elementary in face-to-face, but perhaps we spread them across more buildings than just our elementary buildings. And perhaps secondary students are attending 2 days a week face-to-face, and they're doing at-home learning 3 days a week, so that we can deep clean our schools on Wednesdays, we can deep clean our schools on weekends, so that we have multiple deep cleaning scenarios. And so I'm not saying that is the hybrid model. I'm saying that's an example of some of the hybrid schedules that we've been talking about, all the way to an at-home learning scenario. That could either be because I've chosen not to send my child to school and I'm registering for an at-home learning experience, or we also know that we're going to potentially have students that may have to go home because they've tested positive or they've been in close contact, and they may have to go home intermittently. So perhaps they're home for 14 days. And so that when we are going to support students at home learning, where perhaps they're not feeling symptoms, they're not feeling sick, and they want to continue learning, and we want them to continue learning. And so I guess that could have been a 6th scenario, but we left it at 5. But that's just different than the I'm just choosing the at-home scenario full-time for my child. And so at a very broad, very big picture, these are the various scenarios that our teams came together and developed. And I'll be quiet in a second, see if you have questions, but the rest of our presentation is really getting in, like I presented the skeleton, we're about to get into the meat of this.
Melinda, if I could real quick before our board jumps in with any questions, I want to point out at the center of all of this, so Melinda talked about a lot of operational changes, but she didn't talk about a whole lot of learning changes other than where. And I want to remind the board that we've talked about this back in our June board meeting, and we're going to be talking about it again in our next board meeting. The heart of all of this is our job is to create exceptional learning experiences for kids, no matter what the format that they're learning in. And so while we know we are very proud of the work that was done in our community for our kids in the spring when we were responding in an emergency manner to COVID, we know we have to change the learning environment for kids this fall. And I want to point that out because I think that is one of the things that's on the minds of a lot of our public, a lot of our teachers. And I know Deanna is going to go into it in depth coming up here, but at the heart of this, we are making sure that the learning experiences look different than they did in the spring if any student is in a remote learning or at-home learning setting.
That's an awesome segue into the next. I skipped a slide. So this next slide was just to highlight that based on the TEA guidance that we received most recently, that scenario 3 of the enhanced safety precautions, and then of course the at-home learning option we've already talked about were the 2 that were required by TEA. And so Matt did a great job of segueing into the next slide and the next part of the presentation. Deanna is going to go deeper into the ensuring exceptional learning experiences for each and every student. And so as we transition to the next slide, Deanna is going to join the conversation.
Absolutely. So I too want to begin with our focus is to provide exceptional learning We recognize that the world is very different than we've ever experienced and is bringing us some new challenges, and we're going to address those. But my goal is for us to find some excitement in learning and how we're going to accomplish that this school year, however the child comes to school. Next slide. We've been very intentional in our design to deliver exceptional learning this year, and we really focused on creating this visual that outlines kind of our why and how we're going to provide this to our students. And so we start with recognizing that we have to start with our environment and really making sure that that's inviting, that our learning environments are safe and healthy, whether you're at school or at home. Then we want to really make sure we've built in relationships. This is an opportunity for us to reconnect with our students since last we saw them face to face, to continually build trust and to create learning environments that incorporate collaboration. Again, this is across both environments, at home or at school. We recognize we will be responsive. We must be. That's responsive to how kids are coming to us academically, but then also their emotional needs. We focused a lot, and I'll talk a little bit further in regard to our instruction, but really defining exceptional learning to be relevant, to be student-centered, to foster critical thinking, and to ensure we provide feedback. And then we can't forget in all of this that we have a commitment to our kids to celebrate them, to celebrate their learning, to make sure we're communicating with everyone and that we're responding to their needs. Next slide. We spent some time listening since March with over the course of our planning to make sure that we really are hearing our teacher voice. We had multiple Zooms with teachers to get their feedback. We've had conversations with them. We've had conversations within our teaching and learning department to really identify exceptional learning and what that means to us. And so we've outlined 4 critical elements that we believe must be present. One, we recognize learning needs to be captivating, real world, meaningful, and authentic for our students. It has to be student-centered. Our goal is to reach each and every student. And in order to accomplish that, we've got to make sure learning is student-centered, individualized with choice. We really want to promote critical thinking. That's where we get into the depth of knowledge, not just surface knowledge, but really including a depth of understanding that's experimental and interactive and collaborative in either world, at school or at home, and that will focus on our feedback. This is an area that we're really going to have to refine over the year to provide student ownership and growth and progress monitoring of our students as they progress. Next slide. So we recognize there is a lot of fluidity in where students are going to be this year. And while it sounds like it's 2 choices, you're going to choose to come to school or you're going to be at home, we recognize that fluidity, that at any time you are at school, something may happen and you're at home for a while. What we know is that across either of these environments, we want to ensure that we're providing an exceptional learning experience, that we're meeting the needs of each and every student. We're focusing on relevancy, student-centered, critical thinking and feedback. And then we provided a device and an access to online platforms. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but every student will have a device and we'll have platforms, Seesaw for our early learners, pre-K through 2, Google Classroom 3 through 5, and Schoology and Canvas for our secondary students. And then we'll implement consistent grading practices. Some of the things though, however, we do know are that it'll be a little different in the environments. When you choose school learning, you're planning with an intent to come to school right now 5 days a week, that ideally will have your teachers will be assigned from your home campus. But what we do recognize is even when you choose this, there may be circumstances where you're at home in intermittent learning for generally 1 to 3 weeks, unless there's, of course, a change in governance or school closure. For at-home learning, if you're choosing at-home learning, we recognize that you're choosing instruction 5 days a week. We're still fleshing out how this will work, but we're looking at teachers being assigned to at-home learners because we recognize that we want that commitment with both environments to really meet the needs of our students, except for maybe in some high school courses, especially in some specialized courses. We're thinking that there'll need to be a commitment to choosing at-home learning for at least a 9-week grading period. That's because we're going to design a lot of processes and support in place, and we want that consistency for our learners to ensure that exceptional environment. And then there may be some potential at-school attendance for certain high school courses where their content just cannot be delivered completely virtual. Of course, these are just where we're drafting right now, and these are our thoughts. These aren't anything that's concrete, but it is kind of where we're starting to think. We want to just make sure that we build consistency to our students to support instruction and build their connectedness. Next slide.
Deanna?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Just a quick clarification of something for those that are watching. The commitment to the 9-week grading period, whether you're at home or at the campus, as long as that's available, that is not a Belton ISD thing, correct? That is a mandate put out by TEA. Whichever one you choose, that's what you're in for that grading period.
So it was not a mandate. It was provided in TEA guidance that districts could choose to look at a commitment of a grading period. And so we are looking at that just because for those that choose at-home learning, and we know there's always individual circumstances, but to really to choose that pathway and in the way that we plan to design at-home learning to build collaborations in classrooms virtually, we recognize that consistency is important.
Okay.
Jeff, I'll jump in too on this one. One of the things that we know in this situation is that in this changing environment, our teachers are going to be put in interesting spots. And here's a hypothetical situation that if you have students who just automatically say they all of a sudden would want to opt out of face-to-face instruction right around the end of the grading period, and then all of a sudden come right back, that puts teachers in a really bad spot. And so that's part of the reason we're really looking at these commitments and stuff, is that we do have to provide some stability for teachers to plan and to be able to effectively deliver high quality learning experiences for our kids. So that's some of the rationale behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, this is Suzanne. So I know this will probably be addressed later, or maybe it's just implied, but as far as our special ed students, are these things inclusive of them as well, or these plans?
So yes, in any plan that we're developing, we're looking at our students with special needs, special populations, our pre-K learners, our dual language learners, and we'll be addressing each of their needs across both plans.
I have a quick question about the platforms. I know that people had to learn them quickly in the spring, but will there be training for parents with the online option?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
even with the kids that are face-to-face? I'm assuming that those platforms will still be a part of their teaching. So
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk in a little bit more specifically about kind of those platforms and some of the training opportunities, as well as the type of learning that will occur with them.
okay, thank you.
You bet.
Oh, you're not
So-
off the hook yet.
I was waiting. So I truly appreciate the questions, and I want us to continue that because this is a dialogue. So don't hesitate to catch me with a question.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I wanted to get back to the at home and at school model, and particularly, I guess it's the second bullet under
Can
the.
we go to the back to that slide, please? Thank you.
So the second bullet right under at home, where teachers assigned to at home learning, right? So I know there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of thought on this, right? And initially my thought was, okay, great, you have teachers that teach the students in school, and then you have teachers that teach the students that are out. And I think Matt like completely swayed me the other direction after a conversation, I had with him. And, I keep going back and forth. I've had lots of conversations with parents, about, this particular topic. So it sounds like from this slide, the direction that we're leaning is it would be a dedicated set of teachers for the folks that are remote in the majority of the situations, right? I know you talked about some exceptions, but it sounds like that's the way we're leaning.
Well, I would answer that's an option that we are heavily considering, but yet I too have had many conversations with that and with our team, and there's challenges either way, and I'm going to recognize that. I think one of we're going to really work with our teachers, and we're just trying to figure out who, a child that's at home for a short period of time, that's in and out fluid within a classroom. We've always had kids that have been in that situation. They've had surgeries and been out. They've had mono or something out, flu 2 or 3 weeks and been out. What we recognize is that number is going to increase. That fluidity is going to be probably more than it's ever been. But then looking as we get further along in the process, if there's parents that just are going to choose this, not for a temporary, not for a phase in, not for the whole district, but for, longer term, they're just wanting that. How can we best provide an exceptional learning opportunity for them? And so there, I would tell you in that bullet, there's still a lot of questions, both with how we provide an exceptional learning environment for students, first and foremost, but how we support our staff as they try to manage what they too will be faced with.
So I think what I'm hearing is if we ended up in this model, we would design the educational experience to the remote model, right? Because, I think I said this last meeting too, if you're going to teach remotely, you design the coursework, the delivery of it differently, right? And so if we go with this model, it would allow us that ability. And so that's what we're thinking, right?
So we're looking at how to design that model, and I'll talk about how some of the teaching strategies, but a lot of it also comes down to how do you create a schedule for an at-home learner where they're not faced with, do I get online and I'm there for an entire school day? That's not going to work. But we are in a planning phase that is drastically different from what we did in March. And so just designing, you're right, what's the best learning experience? What creates community? So I think about, I visited with you all as we walked into a pre-K classroom, and they have those morning rituals, and they connect with each other, and they sing the Wish You Well songs for those that aren't present. Well, what's motivating us is how do we design that virtually for families and children where that will be their classroom, and how do we make it just as connected, just as exciting and inviting for those students? And so we're still working night and day through that one.
Deanna, can I jump in real quick? I want to just take 1 minute, and I promise it won't be long, but I think the complexity of this situation is important to point out to our public, to our rest of our board members, to any of our teachers too. And that's that second bullet on the slide that's in front of us on the right-hand side where it says teachers assigned to at-home learning. So I want to point this out, and here's the challenge that we're all facing. So while you as the public or you as board members might sit there saying, why haven't they made a choice on this yet? Some of it really depends on the amount of students and the amount of families that are desiring that online learning experience. For example, if we had 3 kids in Belton ISD out of our 12,200 students, we would not actually assign 1 teacher just for those 3 kids. On the flip side of that, let's say that we have half of our students in families that say they want a virtual learning experience, or in our words, the at-home learning experience. That creates a whole different level of challenging situations. And that is different than a student who wants to come face-to-face, but has a family member that tests positive for COVID and has to stay home for 14 days. So my point in sharing all of this is there's multiple pieces of this puzzle that are very complex. And while it might sound like, hey, they haven't made any decisions yet, part of our job is throwing this information out there and then going to our next step that Elizabeth outlined and getting feedback from our parents about what they're going to be interested in so we can make those concrete plans. So Chris, I appreciate you bringing that question up, and I wanted to make sure that people understand the complexity of it a little bit and that we will be continuing to use their feedback in data to help us plan well for it.
And Matt, if I could jump in real quickly, and they're going to transition us back a couple of slides because I want to make sure we were really clear on, it's one of the gauge slides, that one, perfect. Okay, so a couple of things. What Matt just explained in terms of the complexity of knowing how many students are going to select that option number 5, when I'm saying number 5, we're talking about a virtual learning choice, not the intermittent, not that I'm going home for 14 days, but that's my default plan. The state will not allow us to ask parents to commit to that plan prior to 2 weeks before school starts. So we are going, yeah. So we're going to talk at the end of the presentation about the window. We're going to open the window up, but we are not allowed to ask someone to commit to that option until 2 weeks prior to school. So I just wanted to highlight, adding to the complexity of it, there are some of those requirements as well. And I blew through this slide pretty quickly, so I just wanted to make sure that as Deanna is talking and as the rest of the team's talking, it looks very similar to the gauge I showed prior to this slide, but the green area, the phase 3, and the gold area, phase 5, those are the 2 phases because of the guidance of TEA that we were given. When you start to hear the plans in more depth, we're really talking about right now those 2 scenarios. And so I think I blew over that pretty quickly and wanted to make sure that I was clear about that. And Deanna next is going to really dig into, I believe, synchronous and asynchronous learning in that at-home learning environment.
I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, so stop me. But so how did our sister district to the east poll the audience already for? Was that just an informal poll? That Temple did. Yeah, I'm seeing yeses. Okay. Okay. All right.
So I want to be clear. Temple sent out a survey to their families, and they got hard data back from their families.
Right.
And they've done an exceptional job in their planning. And I speak with Bobby often, and I think they've done an exceptional job in their planning. We chose to hold off on that survey just because we wanted to be a little closer to the window of time. So I want to be clear pointing that out. They've done an excellent job with their planning. We chose to hold off a little bit in a different mindset because with the changing landscapes and the scenarios that are coming out, we felt that holding off would give us a more accurate count.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one more clarification. When we're saying teachers, does that also include our school counselors, that they'll be, are we using that term globally to also include counselors, especially at the elementary level?
In relation to just in general, when we speak?
Right. So when they do their social emotional learning, is it included both at home and at home?
We will we are working on a social emotional learning component that will be both at school and at home with however it's delivered. Yes, that is an important piece of our and that kind of goes back to that first piece about their responding to them both academically and emotionally.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So next slide. So I'm going to talk about asynchronous and synchronous learning, and I'm going to talk about these components specifically in an at-home learning environment. However, anyone you ask in the teaching and learning department would tell you that these terms could be used with at school and when you're doing face-to-face instruction. It's but TEA has put their own assumptions around these terms and some of the guidance they've given. So we want to kind of address it in that realm as well. And so with asynchronous learning, Students can learn at any time, and it's a little more, it's one way. Teachers provide you materials, but you can access them at any time. You have a flexibility to learn at your own pace and speed, and you can use a lot of tools for feedback that you do as a student when you're ready. In a synchronous environment, that requires, it's a two-way, so it's at a specific time, and it requires teachers and students to be online together. It allows for students to ask teachers questions in real time, and then for teachers to provide immediate feedback and communication. In terms of TEA, they have identified these terms and are requesting districts to provide a plan for which option you will choose, and then that will designate how you take attendance. And so in Belton, we intend to submit an asynchronous plan, and that is only because it provides the most flexibility in terms of taking attendance. However, when we create and design our asynchronous plan, it will have synchronous components embedded in it, because we do not believe that to only have an asynchronous plan and never incorporate specific times to meet, specific times for direction and feedback is the best design. And I know that might sound very confusing, but that goes with TEA's guidance and which plan we choose for attendance purposes and for counting attendance. We are developing a plan. I want to echo what Matt said earlier, that is very different from the plan that was delivered in the spring. And I just need to remind everyone that when we developed that plan, we were responding in a crisis situation to circumstances around us. It was an immediate turnaround, and we developed a plan that at that time was what we felt everyone, our stakeholders, our students, our teachers could do. But it's not something that we want to repeat. We learned a lot from it, and we know that we'll have a different and more robust plan going forward. But we've had time to plan. Next slide. So what is it going to look like? Well, like I said, we'll have asynchronous and synchronous learning. We're going to focus on building relationships, collaboration, and communication. We will have recommended daily schedules for engagement, even though our plan will say it's asynchronous. There'll be daily schedules. And then we'll provide a variety of instructional guidance and tools. Next slide. So I want to further delve just a little bit into kind of what these two worlds look like, because both types of learning are essential to exceptional learning. We have invested heavily, and Mike's going to talk about it a little bit later, in computer devices and online platforms to accomplish this type of learning. We have exceptional teachers that are doing amazing things. They have been doing amazing things, and they're going to continue to do that. For example, this summer alone, we have offered 88 sessions around instruction in these platforms and how to use them. And we have had 736 teachers in those sessions. They are committed to making this exceptional for our students moving forward. We worked with our teachers through Zooms over the summer to have them share with us learning that they accomplished over the spring, and then really had a rock star team developing some summer lessons to try out and become trainer of trainers for how to engage in these types of learning for our other teachers throughout the year. And so just to give you some insight, we have kindergartners right now who are engaging in investigating topics and researching and sharing their discussions using the Seesaw platform. They're 5. We have elementary students who designed makerspace models and completed challenges using a Google Classroom platform and collaborating with their other classmates. We have secondary students who are completing real world topics and using discussion boards and collaboration tools through Schoology and Canvas. This type of collaboration is enhanced with digital access. We cannot do it without those tools, whether we're face-to-face or at home. Our devices will be used both in the classrooms when you're at school and then when you're at home. When you think about a lesson and you're in a classroom and you're in an asynchronous portion of class, you might be responding to a discussion board. Maybe you're taking a quiz. Our kids have email accounts that they're submitting. They may be submitting documents. They may be submitting assignments. They may be completing or watching a lesson that a teacher videotaped or recorded ahead of time. We're also going to enhance, though, the synchronous components of learning. And in synchronous components, it's like we are right now. We all came together at the same time. We're collaborating together. We're sharing our screens. We're able to live chat and text with one another. And we'll be, asking questions, giving feedback. All of those things can happen and are happening in classrooms as young as our pre-K and our kindergarten students is who we have this summer.
Yeah, and just a clarifying question for you, for everyone. When you're speaking of these experiences that you're talking about right now, what this will look like for students, are you talking about the at-home learning model or in a face-to-face model?
So I think they'll happen in both environments. I've been talking about in an at-home learning. I want to make sure that we clarify and distinguish between what may have happened, in the spring and how that's really going to look in planning. But this also happens in a classroom where you're face-to-face. It's very possible. And, when you look at our elementary classrooms and I'm in the middle of a reading workshop and I could have some of my students in a face-to-face with me and we're having that synchronous moment and we're discussing a book and I have kids in their stations and they're in an asynchronous model. Our goal is as a department and working with our teachers is to set the bar for exceptional learning, and a byproduct becomes your location, whether you're at school or at home. That will not impact or change the exceptional learning experience that we plan to deliver.
For what it's worth, I think there's a ton of value in bringing some of this conversation into the classroom, right? Like, as you were saying, right? In the real world, right? There's real world value to that. In my world, in the IT consulting space, like, I'm dealing with people around the globe, right? And using these tools live in person every day to make those interactions. And so, where we find those things that it's the best practice or the most enriching experience or most involving experience to bring that into the face-to-face classroom, I think there's some benefit there. So that's exciting, actually. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's very exciting. And I think that is what, I'm so glad you used that word, because, we have got to find that excitement and that joy of learning and not let anything else that's happening around us circumvent that or overshadow what we plan to deliver in our classrooms with our kids, because that is our priority. Next slide. So to deliver this, we have exceptional teachers. We had them pre-COVID, we have them during COVID, we'll have them after COVID. But we recognize that in order to support them, this is going to take more planning time. It is that is not going to go lost on us, that we know what it was on our teachers in the front forehand of this front line with instruction. And so we are committed to exploring ways to increase planning time for our teachers to accomplish that in our classrooms. We know they'll need it to deliver whether students are at home or at school, will know they're already showing up committed to us, and they're building capacity among themselves. I'm pretty sure right now most elementary teachers, if they haven't already, are still working on their Bitmoji classrooms. I've seen them. I've seen the pictures of them. We are partnering with them, and they are leading the way even for us and showing us what they're accomplishing. And we, like I said, will work. We're going to be working on exploring options that we could provide extended planning time for teachers to support them in this adventure.
Hey, can I ask about the little guys for a second? Right. So my gears have been turning ever since you were talking about the kindergartners and pre-K, like this stuff remotely. Right. And I'm just thinking about, okay, wearing my parent hat, what kind of parent involvement has that required? And, especially like for some of our pre-readers, right, being able to navigate some of that stuff on their own. I don't know if we're going to get to that later, or if I'm, I don't know. That's all I can stop. That's all I can think about at the moment is how do those guys interact? But
oh, well, they interact. I mean, I can tell you my child sent his first text with an audio recording at the age of 2 using an iPhone. And they're growing up in this world. But you mentioned it, and I want to go back because Rosie had a question on it earlier. I want to make sure I really answer that. We are, in addition to the training that we're offering for our teachers, we recognize we will also have support for parents. We have folks now that are working on videos to support parents with, even that we've even talked about how to unbox a device. And when you get it, how do you unbox it? How do you set it up? What does it look like? How do I log into platforms? We have purchased, we're working on a platform which will be a single sign-on, so that when you go into a screen and you put your child's name and password in, it'll open up all the different tools they have available to them, so you won't have to go into different places. We're focusing on that. We focused on, so we have 4 platforms: Seesaw, Google Classroom, Schoology, and Canvas. And that is because to meet the exceptional learning for each age group, we needed a different platform. The way Seesaw approaches instruction and the tools that they have are different from Google Classroom. And so they need to be there for our K and 2. Yes, it's going to take some more support from parents, certainly, and we're going to partner with them to support their youngest learners. It's going to take a lot of engagement from parents and commitment on an at-home learning choice, because kids are going to have a different plan that's going to follow, similar to what they would be at school, and the expectations there.
Mm-hmm. And so now I'll maybe bring us back to the slide that's actually on. All right. So planning for teachers. I would expect we may need some more support in the classroom, right? Whether that's a real classroom or the virtual at-home classroom, right? And so I guess one of the things at some point I'd be interested in is, what do we think that additional support looks like? And, what do we as a board need to do to potentially help facilitate that? So, yeah. Okay.
Deanna, if you would, can you give just a couple of details on it? I think, Chris, it goes to your point here about how do we support teachers well in this?
Right.
And just talk real quickly, Deanna, on what we might be exploring here on the extended planning time for teachers and feeling things out.
So I think we're looking at surveys where you're talking about, like,
yes.
If we're thinking of could we support late start days or earlier times, and where we could utilize mornings or afternoons for teachers for additional planning? What would it look like if we pull teachers together at specific times and provide additional planning? Just really like looking at our schedule and how we can maximize support. It's time. It's time for teachers to create the environments and to utilize the tools. We've done a lot of And I just can't thank our teachers enough for showing up this summer. And we've created a lot of classrooms right now. We have a lot of training right now that's self-paced, so that teachers can go ahead and familiarize themselves with some of these platforms and be ready. And then one of the other things we're doing to support teachers is we're building teacher capacity for teacher leaders on every campus, so that they have that immediate person in contact to walk through this journey with, show them how it can be done and ease some of their fears. Does that answer that?
Yeah, I think for now, right? I mean, it's good Cam for the moment, right? For what we know. Yeah.
I think what we want you to hear, and certainly our staff out there, is that we recognize this is more in depth, and it's more, and that we've got to support them in having that time.
Right.
Any other questions? Okay, well then I am going to pass the baton to Mike, who's going to talk about exceptional operational services.
Hey, Mike, before you start, can I jump in real quickly? You asked a great question around support for from the board on this, and I just want to make sure we're being really clear. Our teachers are being, we were all thrusted into a blended learning model, right? Like we know we have to be prepared to potentially, we could find out schools shut down again, like we experienced this spring, or we're going to have times where we're back in a face-to-face environment. And so for teachers to, with new devices and increasing that density of those devices, this is an incredible time to really capitalize on what technology can do in our classrooms. It can customize learning in ways that we can't do face-to-face without technology enhancing it. This is an opportunity for us to show that learning can happen anytime, anywhere. And all of that's going to take time. Like, we're going to have to grow the muscles of what blended learning really looks like and get better at that over time. And so I just wanted to reemphasize this extended planning time. We're not exactly sure what that could look like, but it might be that we're asking for where we're changing a school bell, a schedule one time a week, or maybe 2 times a week, in order to give teachers extra time to be able to navigate both a face-to-face and virtual world for kids that are intermittently leaving us, but also so that we're prepared, so that if we are shut down because cases increase, our teachers are supported and prepared to do that. And so I just want to reinforce that extended time could look like asking for a bell schedule to be altered, so we gain an additional hour of time for teacher planning. So I just wanted to share that as an example. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. Well, I guess
real quick on that, can I ask a question? Because I don't know the answer, but I heard what you just said. For the blended learning, or let's take the kids out of it that are at the school, if we do have separate groups, do we have any idea with the minutes, I think it's called minutes, the minutes of educational instruction that how does that, so we adjust bell schedules, how do we get all of our X amount of minutes plugged into that? And then how does the minutes affect our kids that are at home? Because there's no way to track that, obviously. What is the state, is there guidance on that right now?
Jeff, we spent quite a bit of time talking about that as Region 12 superintendents today. And there's a lot of questions out there about that right now. We have a specific amount of minutes that are required by the state. And those amount of minutes have been guiding us for the past few years in the state of Texas. And one of the things that with TEA putting out the guidance on synchronous and asynchronous learning that we have not gotten clarification on yet is, can you provide an hour of asynchronous learning or 2 hours of asynchronous learning for kids and still have those count toward the instructional minutes. We spent a lot of time as superintendents talking about that today. We don't have clear guidance on that right now, but I think it's important why we're bringing this up. Our teachers need to hear, we understand that there's a lot of moving parts, and we're going to be asking a lot of our teachers. We are committed to turning over every stone to figure out how we can support our teachers in giving them more time to plan. Right now, the guidance does not allow us to do that. But I will say this, the guidance is changing on a daily basis right now. And I do believe that there might be more flexibility coming up.
Right.
So to Jeff's point on minutes though, I mean, can you assign minutes to an assignment, right? And so, you know, hey, look, I'm giving you X hours worth of work, right? It may not take you that long to do it, but it's worth that many minutes. I don't know. But then that was just stream of consciousness, I guess. But back to the support one last time, right? I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about is, you know, how do we manufacture some of that planning time, and would we potentially need to have some additional people in order to help us create some of that time, right? Like, you know, I don't know if it's, you know, a sub that's either on hand, you know, virtually or on campus, right? That we can create some time to rotate a teacher out, but still get instruction happening when that teacher rotates out. I don't know, right? So when I asked the question, it was really more about, do we think there's some things that might be more about dollars and cents that we might need to do to help supplement what's going on? So we're not going to answer that here, right? But I just want to make sure that if there's something like that that you all think about, like that we talk about that, right? And yeah.
We can promise that we will not be afraid to talk to you all about that. We are, as we're moving through this, we are going to be, Deanna mentioned it, we are going to be asking for direct feedback from our community on how we can support teachers in their planning efforts and stuff. Some of it might come down to monetary things. Some of it might come down to extended time for them. So we will directly try and make sure that we're communicating that with you.
Dan, I have a question.
Yes.
Obviously, we're talking about all of this because of the virus and parents concerned about their kids being exposed and being with a group of kids. Have you had any feedback from or questions from parents? Because obviously, some students take different courses. They're on different tracks. Is there any potential downside to a student engaging in virtual learning versus face-to-face, depending on what kind of track they're on towards graduation?
Well, I think the challenge is going to be that we provide exceptional learning with parents having that choice. We're always going to default to, we love to have students and we want to have students face to face. I don't think anything will ever take the place of face to face interaction. And when I think about the question and what you're asking, I think about, we have some very specialized courses. We have welding. We have an extensive welding just immediately comes to mind, but we have extensive CTE courses, fine arts courses. We have students that play instruments that don't leave our buildings. We have, you might be playing a bass instrument or percussion. We have kids that are in automotive courses and ag classes and nothing's going to take the place of those and experiential learning. And I'm always going to say that, but the challenge is going to be in the time that we're in and in the option that parents do have for at-home learning. How will we make that exceptional for kids? And that's why I referenced very early on, there will be some courses that we will have to have some at-school attendance to. There's no way to completely get around that, but we are challenging ourselves to identify ways to do things virtually in a world where we're forced to do that right now.
So in other words, there's, because of the certain courses that have to be taught face-to-face, essentially, there are going to be students that, even if they want to stay home, they're not going to be able to. They're going to have a hybrid situation themselves.
We're gonna have to. I mean, there's just gonna be some things when we think about, so I really go back and I think about our CTE courses. I think about, those high quality skills, work ready, the equipment that we're using, our homes aren't going to have, I think, I walk through the culinary classroom and you have, industry standard equipment, industry standard mixers or welding equipment, our home's not going to have that. And so the challenge is going to be how do you support a student in their learning to the greatest extent possible? And then where will you say, but for, completing this industry-based certification, you're going to need to come in for some time. TEA has given some guidance on what those courses that they recognize and are willing to start to publish will need some of that face-to-face time, and then where you'll provide some things virtually. I do think at-home learning, I just want to go back to, because you also kind of mentioned this, is it's going to take a commitment from that learner and that family to be able to have that support as well as we work with them. Some students will, it's easier, and some classes are easier than others. I think about AP Calculus. I might need to be there with that teacher every day face to face, and other of our students, they can, and so it's just us providing those tools, but then also recognizing with each learner where they'll need support.
Thank you.
Deanna, what's the thought right now on band and choir, considering the, I don't know if y'all are ready to talk about that yet.
Well, I'll talk about it a little bit. All the details aren't there yet. There's many components to band and choir. There are students that are in advanced bands, and so if they're at home and we can provide them opportunities to practice music, and they can submit virtually their performance and how they're doing, and that might be an easier adjustment. They may be playing their own instrument, and it's not a large drum that stays at the school or with orchestra bass, but and then there'll be other challenges where maybe you're in a beginning band and you've never played an instrument, and part of your experience at school is working and getting that one-on-one instruction. And so we're going to find our way on how we support learners. Same is true with choir. So there's a difference between your experience and your education and your learning, and then participation in group events. And how can I support you? For instance, and we mentioned choir. How can I grow you in your vocals and your individual capability? But you may not be participating in a large performance. And so and we may not have those. The rules are changing daily.
I guess when I think about any class that would be more difficult to contain, the issue of COVID, those would be the two that come to mind that are a little more complicated. Because I
want to jump in on the choir one, especially and stuff. Yeah, there's distance issues, there's mask issues, there's all sorts of things like that. And so we're waiting for a little more guidance on some of those things, and there's going to be a lot to still sort out. Again, going back to what we've been trying to say in all of this is that we know that things are going to look different. We're doing our best to try and figure out, if we're face to face, how we can provide the best opportunity possible for kids to experience the things they love and why they really want to be in school. But those two examples that you just shared, Janet, those are two that there's a lot to figure out still on those. And I think every superintendent and principal around the state is feeling that.
Thank you for clarifying, because my response to that was in terms of how do you participate in band or choir if you're at school or at home. So I probably misinterpreted your question. I was kind of piggybacking off of Manuel's. But yes, Matt's right. We're focused at school as well, what parameters we have in place. Any other questions about our exceptional learning opportunities? Okay, well, I will try again. I'm going to pass the baton to Mike, who's going to talk about exceptional operational experiences.
Good evening. Good evening, President McDonald and trustees. It's my pleasure to get to visit with you for a few minutes tonight and kind of talk about some of the planning that we've been going through as our team as we try to get ready to provide support for those exceptional learning opportunities that you've heard so much about so far. And we kind of labeled this slide as exceptional operational services. And we want to, as part of our planning, we brought together a team of our directors, our assistant directors. We've gotten input from staff members. We've had principals that have worked with us through these operational processes. And throughout both phases of our planning and everything that's gone on in between, we've tried to listen to the voices of our staff and our teachers and of our community, and the feedback that we got informs of the thought exchange too. So as we started both of these processes, we really broke down those themes and those individualized comments that came from our community back at the end of May in our June planning, and then from our teacher groups at the end of June and our early July planning. And we really wanted to try to make sure that not only did we follow the guidelines that we're responsible to follow, that we also heard the concerns of those stakeholders. And we hope to walk away tonight with hearing some of the concerns that you have, or that you may have heard from some of your constituents. And then we look forward to these next feedback rounds as our surveys go out, and we hear what the real concerns of our community are, and make sure that we've tried to address all those in the best ways that we can. So next slide. So we kind of just have a general idea here. And so as we talk about exceptional operations, and as we talk about operational services to meet our needs, it's important to know that we're going to have students across the spectrum that are going to have needs of our operational services. And that's going to be for whatever school looks like, from face-to-face to the intermittent learners to the person that's 100% at home. There's going to be operational expectations that we're going to need to meet, and we're going to need to meet those in an exceptional way for those students. So as we worked through this, we worked through action items, department by department, and we came up with right around 100 action items. And we tried to see how we could plan across all of these different situations that these students and our campuses may be in as we prepare for these. And so we focused on prevention. One thing that is important is to, when you're trying to talk about a crisis or a problem, is you want to try to prevent as much of that as you can. We talked about mitigation. What can we do to lessen the severity of the dangers and of the concerns that we have? We had to plan for response, and what are we going to do whenever issues come up? We want to plan for educational components, and what can we do to get information out to our students, our staff, our teachers, our parents. And then we want to make sure that we're clear and kind and precise in our communication, that we're required to give, and that we feel like we're obligated to give. As we plan through operations, we have to remember that we are also bound by, in some cases, TEA guidelines and TEA restrictions, where we operate with ideas that we're listening to what the CDC has to say. We're listening to what local, state, and national health guidance we are being given. In the cases of school transportation and school nutrition, we're having to follow both state and federal guidelines that are implicitly tied to funding for those programs. And then we want to listen to best practices and common sense too. I mean, there's sometimes you take all of those different guidance that you're given, and what's going to work best for us, and what's going to work best for our kids and our staff and our teachers. So those are kind of the areas where we tried to work through on a department by department basis, and we tried to talk about the different things that we need to consider with one goal. In addition to the health or in addition to the exceptional learning environment for our students, we want to focus on the health and safety of our students and staff, and really how do we accomplish that goal. And we know that people are all over the place on their fear levels and their concerns and what they feel that they need for themselves and for their children in terms of a fulfilling educational experience. And we want to try to provide operational support to meet those needs the best we can. One message has been loud and clear since day one, and this has come from local, state, and national guidelines, is we have got to do a good job of encouraging, training, and providing opportunities for frequent hand washing. I mean, we know that's a fact. That's been message one from day one. And when you can't have frequent hand washing and proper hand washing, then you need to have hand sanitizer available. So, we've worked through processes where we can envision enhancing our hand washing, not only training, but opportunities, but we also have hand sanitizer available at entrances, at cafeterias, at event entrances, in classrooms, on buses. And that we make sure that not only is it available, but that our kids actually understand how to use it, why to use it, and that they use it at the appropriate times. We know that avoiding close contact to the greatest extent possible is a great way to help mitigate the spread of the virus and of all viruses, actually. So we see maybe there will be some educational components of this that can carry over once this crisis is done. We envision, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about face coverings, but we envision a scenario with our current realities where we envision wearing face coverings to the greatest extent possible. And we'll talk a little more in detail about that. We think that there's going to be resources are going to need to be provided. Messaging is going to need to be provided by staff, by signage on our campuses, on social media, on our websites, for our students to be saturated with the positive messaging about things and steps they can do to help prevent and mitigate this virus. And then we also want to make sure that for our staff and for our teachers, that not only do we give them the most current and the best information we can, but we also have best practices and strategies that they can use as they do their jobs to also help prevent and mitigate and to leave them in as safe an environment as we possibly can. So those are kind of the things that we talk through. I mean, we envision lessons to our younger learners and even our older learners about the proper way to sneeze, the proper way to cough, the proper way to use hand sanitizer, the proper way to wash your hands, along with the messaging on face coverings and close contact as well. And so that's kind of the general overview. I do have some other areas, 7 or 8 other areas that we'll get a little more specific in kind of what our planning has uncovered. But I would like to just take if there's a general question or comment, I'll take that at this time, because I just threw a whole lot of information at you in a very short amount of time. But we've spent almost 2 full weeks together by departments and with principals planning, and then we've done a lot of work. And I'll say we've got great department leadership. I can't thank our health services director, Charlotte Smith, and her team enough for just the go-between that she's been between our local, state, and national health guidance, interpreting TEA guidance, and then helping us put that in a way that we can articulate that into plans for our departments. So there's a lot of work's gone in. We're not there yet. We feel like we've got pretty good response so far, but we still have a lot of work to do before kids actually we start meeting the needs of our kids.
Mike, could you
Yes.
talk to us about your thoughts on the buses?
Certainly. Can I go to the next slide? Okay, can I go one more slide and then we'll come back? Or one more slide. So we do have so transportation services is a tricky one, because we were fully anticipating to get some, the summer guidance from TEA had set summer bus capacity at 13-to-1 ratio. So if you think about what 13-to-1 means, that means 1 kid per row, 2 seats. So 13 kids at a time on the bus. So one of the first things we did back in June when we were planning was we started planning for worst case scenarios to best case scenarios for transportation services. And so that what obviously worst case scenario would be a mandate of a 13-to-1 bus ratio, and what that would actually mean on time, on the time it would take to get all of our bus riders to school at 13 kids a trip. We also built in kind of what a timing system would look like on a 26-to-1 ratio. That would be 1 kid per seat on a bus. And then we looked at what our current realities have always been on timing of a full capacity on a bus. So we do know that maintaining close contact or avoiding close contact is going to be very difficult on a bus at full capacity. So far, the TEA guidance has been to mitigate close contact exposure is to wear a mask. That's the best way to do that. They also advise districts to, the TEA guidance was to advise districts to, when possible, have families provide their own transportation to school and to carpool and do things that avoid that experience of having a lot of kids on a bus. So as we've built through these plans, we've kind of built through what the timing would look like on a full capacity, on a half capacity or a 26 capacity and a 13 capacity. And then part of our parent survey that's going to go out is we're trying to kind of get an estimate of percentages on, under current realities, how many families that qualify for transportation services would actually depend on those transportation services or would want to provide their own transportation to school. So we know that for some families, providing transportation for their children is not an option. And if they're going to come to school, they're going to have to be on a school bus to do so. So we want to be responsive. We want to gauge the kind of the needs of our community and then build our plan based off of that, knowing that we can go all the way down to 13-to-1 capacity. We just know it's going to take more time to get those kids to school. So where you might run a route once for elementary students, you might have to run that route 3 times in the morning. And so you start getting into building into some staggered start times, possibly building in some specials or interventions on the elementary campuses for sure, while you get those other students to school. And that might be some of the way that you disperse some of those classes like PE and like music, where you might have a larger group of students together at once. Maybe you start dispersing those as you shift through and get those kids there. Under TEA guidance, we would try to mitigate by mask wearing, by hand sanitizing, and by disinfecting our buses, while not putting us in the worst possible scenario of a 13-to-1 capacity option, which really throws some logistical concerns on your face-to-face learners if it takes an hour and 20 minutes to get everyone to school in the morning.
Mike, can you talk to us a little bit about the athletics, the fall? Of course, football, volleyball comes into session. Part of the track and field gets going. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how we're going to address those things?
Yeah, first and foremost, we will follow a UIL guidance on that, and we're still awaiting the preliminary UIL fall plan was tentatively going to be released on July 20th. We don't know if some of the current happenings with the response to the TEA guidelines being released is going to push that back or not. So, really, we're going to have to build our plan based off of what UIL, TEA, and ultimately the governors say we are or are not going to do. So I will say that the summer program has gone well. We have gone above and beyond what the UIL guidance was for our staff, and as far as distancing, sanitation and disinfection, mask wearing, all of those regards, capacity limitations. We feel like that we've exceeded the expectations that the UIL has given, and to the extent of the best that we can tell with what data has shown, that we have done a pretty good job of mitigating some of those instances where we could get mass spread or those types of things. So as far as how is the fall going to look, as far as, and I think this kind of goes to the question of band and choir and some of those other extracurriculars as well. I hate to put it this way, but a lot of what we are able to do is going to depend totally upon UIL guidance and UIL restriction and what their plan looks like, whether it's a late start. Right now, tentatively, volleyball and football is scheduled to start on August 3rd, and summer bands actually will start their workouts up next week. So we're kind of waiting on it and kind of counting on that guidance to come from UIL to tell us: are we going to have a late start? Are we going to have a shortened seasons? Are we going to move some seasons around? Are we going to push everything back and maybe push the spring sports later into the summer? I mean, there's a lot of options on the table. I think, and one would be proceeding as scheduled with what the normal times would be from them. And then part of it would be shortened seasons and delayed starts. So we're kind of awaiting on that guidance. And obviously, not only will we follow that guidance because we do want our kids to have those opportunities if allowed, but we do anticipate that Coach Skidmore and Mr. Zulke and their staffs will figure out plans where we can go above and beyond the health guidance that's given to us by those organizations.
Thank you, Mike.
Can I bump back a couple of slides? Yes, that one. So when we talk about prevention and mitigation, I'm not going to go through this item by item and discuss each one, although we'd be more than happy to field questions. We do feel like it's gonna take some resources to provide the best and healthiest and safest environment that we can. And we're thankful for TEA. TEA has secured some PPE. It's called our PPE allotment, and these are items that we're expecting to receive within the next 2 weeks. And notable on that, and just the sheer volume, if you think about this statewide, 110,600 disposable masks, 27,000 reusable masks, thermometers, 1,300 gallons of hand sanitizer that's headed our way, 1,600 face shields. So we're thankful for that, and we fully intend to use those as part of our operational process. We've also taken some steps. We've already made some purchases. We started making purchases back in the spring that we felt like we knew we would need if and when the time comes that we return to campus. Here recently, we have, as we've thought about best practices for cleaning and sanitation and disinfection, we have purchased 100 PSAMs backpack mist systems where we can go in and quickly sanitize a restroom or sanitize a classroom or disinfect a bus when needed and as part of our daily cleaning routines. We have purchased some hand sanitizer dispensers. We have priced out some portable hand washing stations that we would have available on our campuses, so we could envision a situation where as kids come in from recess, the washing stations are there. They can wash up quickly before they go back into the school. We could wheel them into the cafeteria, and it would give us some more hand washing opportunities for kids coming into the lunchroom. Those are things that would be an appropriate COVID response, but those would be things that we could use year round. I mean, we always need kids to wash their hands before they eat, regardless of situation. So we're looking at, receptionists and our high traffic clerical staff that are dealing with public and dealing with paperwork all day, some desk shields, some plexiglass desk shields for them. For certain populations of student populations, maybe some desk barriers and things of that nature. For certain student populations, a face shield may be a better option than a face covering. For some teachers, a face shield might be a better option than a face covering. So we're looking at all of those PPE options, all of those equipment options. Obviously, we want our health services and our nursing staff to be well equipped. We want our cleaning staff to be well equipped if they have to go in and clean up an instance of a student or staff member that has become ill, and we want to be able to respond to that, and we want to have the right equipment to do the job. So the next step for us is to kind of look at all options on the table, prioritize those options, and see what kind of works within our resources that we feel like our staff's going to need to really be supported and really be safe as they carry out these tasks. Next slide.
Hey, real quick before you go further. So I know the PPE piece of this is somewhat heated, or at least it can be. I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about this, and disclaimer, I guess I have not talked to any teachers about what I'm about to say. So, but when I'm thinking about this and PPE for the staff, I mean, the more and more I think about the face shields, right, the more and more I feel like that would be, if we were to require PPE for the staff, right, like the face shields might be the best way to go, right? Because you can get the full facial expression, right? I mean, for the kids that are, in the back of the room reading lips or whatever the case may be, right? Like I can think of so many benefits from a face shield that, I don't know what we're thinking there, but I don't know. There's so many benefits that I think could come from the shield over the mask when I sit back and think about it. But again, I mean, it's a tough subject. So
that's a great statement, and one that we've actually spent a lot of time talking about that already. And from an instructional component, you're absolutely right. There's going to be some of our younger learners, especially that are learning how to spell, learning how to say their letters and things like that. And it's essential that they be able to see the teacher's face. There's also some teachers that they like that interaction with their class. They want their class to be able to read their expressions, and they're going to feel more comfortable with that. I will say, and without getting too much into, from the TEA perspective, they kind of put disposable masks, cloth face coverings, and face shields on equal levels. I know there's some of the other medical guidance that you're going to see may say that a face shield is not quite as effective. So, our recommendation is probably going to be, when appropriate, a face shield is a very good way to act as a PPE as a mitigator. But we also may not recommend close group contact with the face shield. That might be more for when you're providing group instruction, or you can limit your close contact a little bit more. If you're going to have to get in close, then the face covering might be a better option at that point. But yeah, we definitely feel like, and we feel like the same way for some of our student populations, the shield is going to be a better option. Just because some of our special populations and some of those things, the shield may be the better option, or kids that have a medical condition where, especially a respiratory condition, where wearing a mask may not be appropriate for them. So there's several considerations there, and you're absolutely right on. Being able to see someone's face goes a long way in communicating what you want to communicate with them.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we could go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about face coverings just briefly. And current TEA guidance does not mandate face guards, but it does mandate that we will follow Governor Abbott's existing executive order, and in which that executive order could change and probably will change at some time. But so the current executive order would be that face coverings are required when 6 foot spacing is not possible, that for ages 10 and over. Like we just spoke about, face shields would be an appropriate alternative in some instances, but probably not all instances. There would have to be accommodations for health and developmental concerns. There's some populations just a face covering and a mask may not be a good option for any. And then we would envision that students could and would, in a lot of cases, provide their own face covering, but we definitely feel like that we will have both disposable and permanent face coverings and shields available for students that need those. And we would not want any student to be without that protective device or that PPE that needed it. So we would have ample supply of disposable masks, ample supply of full cloth face coverings, and ample supply of shields to meet the needs of our students as far as face coverings.
So Mike, I know that we're going to communicate a lot of information out there to our parents, but on the mask specifically, are we going to definitely call out that parents need to provide masks for their students? I know that we're going to have them, but are we also going to communicate that out specifically to our parents?
We have discussed very recently, as much as 2 days ago, kind of the full spectrum of that, of do we want to, how far do we want to go in providing masks? Do we want to provide them for the students that need them? Do we want to provide them for all students? I could envision, I just know from my own experience, is I've felt the need to use several masks, because that's just like anything else. You're going to want to launder those at some point, and you may not have a chance to before you go back. So I could envision, and we've envisioned the scenario where we do communicate that it's recommended that each student have their own face covering. However, we will provide face coverings for all students who need one. So that's kind of where we've landed on that. Can we ultimately end up in a point where we provide face coverings for every student? Certainly we could do that, and we could do it very quickly. I think, we can make it part of our school supply package as well. So there's several different things that we can look at as far as that, but we will anticipate, under current realities, for our face-to-face learners, there's going to be times when they're going to need to have a face covering on.
Thank you.
Screening is kind of a topic. that is, you know, how far can screening go? How accurate is screening? How efficiently and can you effectively screen 12,000 students on any given day if everyone were here? We will kind of continue with best practices that we're being given, is that parents and guardians need to screen their students each day. And Todd will get into this, but staff needs to screen themselves each day. And our expectation will be, if you're sick, you shouldn't come to school. If you're having symptoms, you shouldn't come to school. If you've been in close contact with someone who is sick or is having symptoms, you shouldn't come to school. And we think that we're going to have enough options where you can provide that intermittent instruction where you're not going to miss a beat. So if you're on, we're going to ask our community, if you're not sure, don't come to school until you're sure. And that's one of the best ways that we can mitigate the spread of the virus. Visitors will be screened, and I'll talk a little bit more about our initial thoughts on visitor precautions, but visitors will be screened. As visitors come onto our campuses, currently they have to go through our Raptor system, and there's a specific purpose for that. But part of the Raptor, we have found out through talking with Raptor in the last couple of weeks that we can make screening part of that, and basically ask them the screening question and the questions, and they can give us their response. We do have the BISD health screening tool. It's similar to the one we used at graduation, and it's similar to the one that will be communicated to our parents and guardians. I know for our summer athletic programs, is they get an email every Sunday, and it has the screening questions, and it says, please go through these questions with your child, and then respond back, you know, where you're at with this. So we are going to have to rely to some degree on honesty and integrity and people doing the right thing when it comes to screening. And then we do envision a world where we have in-person screening and at-school screening for some of our youngest populations and our most vulnerable populations, those that maybe can't communicate as well with us what they're feeling and those types of things. So we will have the tools to take temperatures when needed. We obviously, some school districts are all over the place on this. Hitting every student when they come to school, or trying to take in random classes and just doing some spot screening and things like that. We've seen some schools come out with that type of plan. We still have some screening options on the table, but we will do some self-screening, and we will do some in-person screening for some of our populations.
Mike, I want to point out real quick, I think one of the most important messages that we need to get out to everybody is that this is going to be a partnership with our parents and with our community. In order to actually keep kids safe and get them face-to-face in all of this, we need families to be able to work with their students on a regular basis, answer those questions, and screen their students at home. And I know being a kid that played sports, I wanted to be at school every day, even if I wasn't feeling well. But we're going to have to join together as a community and with our families on this to really dive into how we keep each other safe in these face-to-face settings.
Yeah. So I've got maybe two questions here, right? So when you're talking about screening and potentially asking questions as part of the Raptor system, I mean, are we going to be in a position where we are saving the answers to those questions and need to be worried about, you know, HIPAA requirements and health data and how long we keep it and disposing it and all that kind of good stuff?
That's a great question, and that's and it actually, as we talked about, the ability to be able to screen visitors to your campus is granted under the plan, but that information does have to be destroyed. It wouldn't be saved. Yeah. It wouldn't be released to anyone. So basically, it would be we could keep it we could keep that information, but if someone doesn't pass the screen or answers yes to the screening questions, we would not be able to allow them on campus at that time.
Yeah. And so then the other thing looking at this slide is, you know, if we're going down the path of, hey, it looks pretty likely, at least based on the governor's orders at the moment, right? If we went to school tomorrow, we'd be wearing masks. And talking about the spirit of partnership with families, I mean, I think we need to start that partnership communication now, right? I mean, if kids aren't used to wearing masks right now, they need to get used to wearing masks right now so that their teachers aren't distracted by trying to train them how to wear a mask, right? Because they're uncomfortable, they're distracting sometimes, whatever. I think any kind of pre-training we can do, especially with the youngest ones, right? I would imagine that would be helpful to have, at least communicate about before kids get there.
That's a great point. Thank you, Chris. I agree.
we, you know, one of the things that we're kind of prioritizing as we start messaging is just like Deanna has mentioned, videos for parents on how to log into the different instructional platforms and some of those things. We envision videos where we show how we're going to disinfect a bus, how we're going to disinfect a restroom. And I think that could be the same component there of getting the message out of video on the right way to wear a mask, what it looks like, what appropriate sizing for children. I mean, I know that that's been, as we bought masks in our family, you know, sometimes what you get, what you buy, and what you get, and when you put it on, aren't the same thing. So there may be some messaging we can get on how to appropriately size for different age groups of kids and things of that nature too. So thank you. That's a great point and something we need to get to work on. Visitor precautions. We, depending on, and if you refer back to the kind of the gauge scale that Dr. Golden showed back prior, you know, we can envision different visitor precautions depending on what level of concern we have, right? But some of the main things we thought, some of the great prevention or mitigation tools that we could use as far as visitors is, you know, student drop off is obviously going to be fine, but you know, we could get to a situation where no visitors pass the front door. Deliveries, all deliveries are dropped off in a reception area, that no deliveries go past the front door. We also, one thing we learned this spring is we can be very effective having parent meetings, having 504s meetings, having ARDs in some situations. We can do those virtually and be very effective. In fact, we saw that some parents preferred that because they could get in, get out quicker, and actually spend more time talking about their kids and not traveling to the school and waiting for the meeting to start. So, I mean, there's some things that we can do for visitor precautions, but we ultimately feel like in current circumstances, we're probably going to have to limit visitors on campus. And that's not just included for that. That's for salespeople. That's for, you know, we've been working with Keith Zilke about what our one-on-one private band lessons might look like. And we fully feel like we could do those in a virtual world if we needed to. We could envision a student going into a rehearsal room, Zoom meeting be set up, and their private instructor give them a lesson just like they would normally pull them from their fourth period band class. And we can still continue with some of those while limiting some of the traffic on campus from some of our outside visitors. So you know, those restrictions or those guidelines or those recommendations will probably land wherever we are on our scale, whether we're in you know, extended or you know, extreme safety precautions, or whether we're just in mild safety precautions or no safety precautions. So we'll see where those land depending on the circumstances. Next slide, please. So school nutrition, Rob and his staff have done an incredible job, and we've kind of, the school nutrition is one we've really worked all the way across. What does this look like for at school learners? What does this look like for the family that chooses at-home instruction for the entire semester? And so we know that there are some things we're going to have to do. We know that wearing masks are hard while you're eating lunch. We know that limiting close contact is difficult when you're in a cafeteria, when you may have at an elementary school, you may have 10 or 12 or 15, 16 kids at one table. And so we've designed some systems that we think that will help. So, you know, we know at some point we're probably going to have to limit capacity in our cafeterias. And we've come up with several tools where we think this could happen. And it's going to look a little bit different from age group to age group. And it's going to look a little bit different from campus to campus. But we know that we can do alternate schedules. We know that we can add additional, shorten some lunch periods, maybe add one at the front end, add one at the back end. We know that we can do dispersed seating. We can take certain groups when the weather's nice. Lots of high school kids like to eat outdoors. We know that we could take kids to the gym. We know we could take kids to the auditorium in the campuses that have those. We know we could take kids to a library or a commons area to disperse our capacity. So we feel like the starting point is if we had every kid sitting at 6 feet in our cafeterias, how many kids could we fit in there with that? And then we have to build our capacity off of that by using alternative methods. We're to a point where we will have swipe payment options as point of sale at all campuses. So where you're talking about kids not having to enter their ID on a keypad, where every kid's touching the same keypad. And we feel like that's the direction we need to go, even in a post-COVID world. That's just good business, where everyone's not touching the same keypad right before they eat. Staggered distribution, so we bring classes in waves. We don't have all 200 students in line at once getting their meal. We bring those in 10 or 12 or 20 at a time, and we have them spaced out as they go through. That's a great time to hit the wash station and hit the sanitizer as you wait to go take your grab and go meal. So we have been granted the waiver that for all at-home learners, there will be curbside grab and go at their home campus. We fully anticipate that the highest safety precautions would be taken by our staff, and that our staff would be wearing masks and gloves. We do anticipate that under current realities, self-serve items would be limited, meaning we would not want each student to open the cooler, grab their milk, close the cooler, and go to the next. So we would have systems in place where they basically grab and go as much as we're allowed to and as much as we can. And then we would want to utilize disposable service as much as we could too. We wouldn't want to have a lot of plastic trays going all over the campus and then being touched by the people that are taking them back. We wouldn't want to go with as much disposable service and disposable utensils as we could. So we do envision where every student that wants school nutrition, whether that's on a free and reduced process or whether that's on a pay process, we fully anticipate we would be able to meet their needs. We also have worked out, if we did have to go back to a complete at-home instruction, we've brainstormed and thought of some different ways than what we did in the spring to get those meals to the families at their home, and may not have to require quite as much. We had some great partners in the spring, some great community partners, but we think we could utilize some school resources better to get those meals where they need to go in the event that we have to go to full at-home instruction. The transportation services we already hit. Custodial services, this is one that I think is very important. Obviously, we're going to have a full need, and it's going to be a team effort. Staff, custodial staff, instructional staff, students that commonly touch surfaces are going to have to be sanitized more frequently. We know that. We know that from the guidance we've been given since day one. We know that student areas and areas where students are, where they're receiving instruction, where they congregate, where they use the restroom, those areas are going to have to be sanitized daily. We know that deep cleaning and disinfection is going to be required on incidents of a sick or a potential sick person. We know that restrooms are going to need to be sanitized more often. We anticipate a world where we go out and we sanitize our hard surfaces on our playgrounds if those playgrounds are being utilized under guidance and health directives. And we do know that classroom supplies and commonly shared items will have to have plans to sanitize those. And whether that looks at kid-friendly disinfectants in the classroom, wipes. We know that there's certain types of wipes that can be used that are kid-friendly. We also know that right now, as with some other items, those wipes are hard to get. So we're on some lists, and we're going to get those here as quickly as we can. But we do know that our custodial service team does a fantastic job, and their day may look a little different. We may not spend as much time vacuuming, and we may not spend as much time in some cases cleaning windows and things of that nature. We may spend more time wiping down commonly surfaced areas. And then we have, like I say, we're trying to give some tools to our team where they could go in and sanitize a classroom or sanitize a bus in a faster method and more efficient method than a roll of paper towels and a bottle of disinfectant with spray rigs, foggers, and those types of things. So we fully feel like that we're going to step up our efforts. We need the community and our staff and our teachers to know we're going to step up our efforts, and it's going to be a team process. And our job right now is to come up with processes and to get the tools and the materials we're going to need to make that happen. Next slide, please. So campus clinics, Charlotte Smith and her staff have come up with some great guidelines. We've really worked hard. We started on this process back in March. And we knew that even if school resumed 2 weeks after spring break, that there were going to have to be some things that we were going to have to handle differently in our campus clinics. And so we've kind of gone through the process at some of our smaller clinics, at some of our older campuses. We have is the word public domain appropriate to be used here? We had to find some other areas to expand our clinics. And so we do anticipate that we're going to be able to have an area for students that aren't feeling well, that are ill. And we're going to have a separate area and envision where students that are coming just to take their meds, to take their prescriptions, to get a Band-Aid because they scraped their knee at recess, those types of things will not be, you will limit contact as much as we can. Well, so we will have isolation areas designated in each health clinic. We will have ways that if a parent has to come pick a student up during a high traffic time, we'll have alternate exits and pickup areas that they can come get those students. The alternate spaces, like I said, we've designated at each campus, and we're thankful for our principals for being open-minded and being gracious and allowing us to take over more space that was designated for other uses prior. And then obviously we want to give, if we're going to have staff that's going to be handling and treating and managing and caring for students that might be ill, we want to give them all the proper PPE that we can to keep themselves as safe as possible. And then safety precautions at campuses, those are going to look a little differently. Those are going to look a little differently from campus to campus, but it's some of the things that Dr. Golden alluded to earlier. There's going to be times that in some, we're going to have floor markings, and it's going to be in areas where we're distributing products, and we're going to try to keep our kids to avoid close contact as much as possible. In some cases, we're going to recommend having desks facing the same direction. And in some cases, that's not going to be a possibility. The TEA had a good recommendation of eliminating non-essential furniture where you can spread everyone out a little bit more. Gather outdoor when possible and when appropriate. Eliminate assemblies, large group gatherings to the greatest extent possible. And there's a whole nother discussion about HVAC, air exchange. We met this morning and kind of talked through what some of the CDC guidance has been on HVAC strategies and things that you can do, whether it's a brand new school or a 60-year-old school. There's a few mitigating tools that we're going to look into and see which ones work best for us and which ones actually have been proven to maybe enhance the quality of our indoor air, because I know that's been a concern. I know that one of the recommendations was open windows when possible. Well, most of our schools, we don't have the option to open classroom windows and let fresh air in. So we may have to look at some the best strategies we can to increase our HVAC air exchange and maybe increase the quality of our air in our facilities as much as we possibly can.
Madam President, if it's okay, I wanted to pause here real quick and ask the board if they have any kind of questions. We're going to need to take a break. We've gone a little, we're about 2 hours in right now. We're going to need to take a break here in a couple of minutes. And I wanted to make sure that y'all could have any general questions that you wanted to have answered at this point.
I don't have anything specific myself, but Dr. Montgomery, I know that you're going to be leaving us soon. Do you have anything that, not necessarily a question, a comment, or any other feedback for school openings at this juncture? Any thoughts?
No, I just want to thank everybody for the incredible work that you've done in thinking this through and providing the information to us.
Thank you. Anyone else at this point?
Madam President, would it be okay if we took a break for 5 minutes real quickly and allowed everybody to come back?
Absolutely. It is 7:13. We'll come back at 7:18.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is 7:19. I believe we can go ahead and get started. We're waiting on Jeff, but he can jump right in. So who's up next?
Mr. Morgan, are you going to wrap us up for your section?
Now that I'm warmed up, I'm going to go ahead and continue with my presentation. So no, I have one more slide. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And so, you know, we've thanked a lot of people tonight, and I don't think we can really do this slide justice until we thank you guys, our BISD Board of Trustees, present and past. Belton has had a long commitment to technology. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing that commitment is going to be needed to provide the type of instruction that we want to provide for all of our students. And I just want to kind of summarize kind of where we are in technology. Dr. Lovesmith spoke about the different platforms we're going to use. So Seesaw, Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas. In addition, the district is committing to Zoom and the paid version licenses of Zoom and Remind as a communication tool to help our staff and help our teachers communicate with our students and families. And also the commitment that you guys have shown over the past year, and this really didn't hit home as to the commitment that BISD has made for our students in the realm of technology until we kind of put it on paper and looked at it. So in the past several months, BISD has secured by purchase and potentially lease over 9,400 new devices added for BISD. The majority of those devices are Google Chromebooks. Some are Apple MacBooks for our new tech students, but so 4,169 of those devices that were purchased back in March for just part of our planned replacement cycle for all three of our high schools and for our new middle school campus, BMS. And then the commitment that we made last month by an additional 5,300 devices that accelerated our replacement cycle at our other three middle schools. And it kind of hit one of our technology goals, which was to increase our density, our technology and our device density at all of our elementary schools. So we really feel like as we move into this phase of learning, where we have at face-to-face learners, we have intermittent learners for a variety of reasons, and we have at-home learners, and we have consistent platforms to provide that instruction, that this commitment to technology is what's going to make all this possible. And I just want to thank you guys again, and just really, really try to tell our staff and tell our community and tell you that, you know, is it all going to happen magically with the snap of a finger? No. I mean, some of these devices are going to have to get here. And our TEA commissioner spoke on Tuesday about the people that are just now ordering their devices, that they're expecting some delays and the challenges that's going to provide. We're thankful for you guys that we got ahead of the wave a little bit, and we got some of these devices purchased prior to what's recently happened, and we feel like we're going to be in a good spot very soon. Also, something that kind of goes unnoticed sometimes is our internet connectivity. Daryl Shipper and his staff kind of picked up on some projects that were rolling, and he's brought them to the finish line. And one is that's not really all that well known. As part of our E-rate package, our E-rate program, we do have new fiber networks at all of our BISD campuses this year. So we have greatly increased our width and our capacity for supporting technology at these campuses. Also, with what we already had in stock and additional purchases, we're looking at having over 530 hotspots available for staff and student use. We're also going to saturate our community and our parents with information on communication of affordable internet service. There's lots of great programs out there right now, particularly for some populations of our students that are on free and reduced lunch for very affordable internet packages. And then a new initiative that we're going to kick off very, very shortly is going to be where we're going to try to partner our community resources with families that are in need, and try to do some family internet sponsorship opportunities. And that's going to be in conjunction with several groups. And we're just kind of starting to get that off the ground. But I really look forward to unveiling that in the next couple of weeks, where we're going to be seeking community partnerships to help provide internet for some of our families in need. And so we feel like that, you know, connectivity is on the device side, we feel like we're in tremendous shape. And we feel like we have some work to do on the connectivity side, but we think we've addressed that at our campus levels. We are going to have some options for our families at home. And we see this as a long-term commitment and a post-COVID commitment, where we try to get families in our community internet access that may not currently have it, because we know that availability and opportunity, we want those to be as equitable as we can for all of our students. And so we really want to commit to some partnerships to try to make that a reality for families. So I would take any technology questions at this time. And, you know, really right now, whether we're in face-to-face or whether we're in home, technology is going to be a big key to us providing this exceptional learning. Next slide. So now Mr. Todd Schiller is going to come in and he's going to talk to us a little bit about supporting our teachers and staff.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity to do this. So I want to start off and just say that we recognize that our staff will face challenges this year. And we know that we need them throughout this process, and their health, safety, and contributions are vital to the success of these plans. As mentioned previously, we've been listening to teachers and staff. Elizabeth mentioned that earlier. I'll tell you that the common themes we've heard are, you know, what's going to happen to my accrued sick leave if I get quarantined or if I become sick? What happens if someone else gets sick? What is that process? What safety precautions will we have in place? Do we have enough substitutes? And the final thing that we've heard is, I'm a teacher, am I going to be doing face-to-face and virtual instruction? We've answered some of those questions in previous discussions tonight, but I'll go next slide. To start off, I kind of wanted to show you all this chart. And so this chart addresses 4 situations. And it addresses situations for those that have been in contact with the virus or been exposed to the virus or have actually tested positive with the virus. And this, on the far left-hand side, it addresses those staff members that may report a confirmed case. And so if we have a staff member that reports a confirmed case, there's 3 things that need to be met before they can return back to work. 10 days must have passed since symptoms first appeared. Improvement in those symptoms must be seen before they can return back to work. And then 3 days must have passed with no fever and under no medication to reduce the fever. That second set of boxes that you see there going across the page is if a staff member reports COVID symptoms. Those same first 3 things will be considered that we just talked about with if you're quarantined, all 3 of those things must be met. There's some additional things to consider though too. So if a doctor provides a medical note that diagnoses their symptoms as something that's not COVID and says they can return to work, then they'd be able to return to work without going through those 3 steps. Or if they receive 2 separate confirmations of a lab test that are 24 hours apart and both are negative, then they can return to work at that time as well. The third situation going across the page is if a staff reports that they have been in close contact with someone who has tested positive. And remember, close contact is defined as being within 6 feet for a cumulative duration of 15 minutes or being directly exposed to the infectious secretions while not wearing a mask or shield or face covering. And so if we have a staff member that's in that situation, they will be quarantined for 14 days from the last day of exposure. And then the final situation that's represented there on the chart, if a staff member reports someone they have had close contact with that has been exposed to someone who has tested positive. So it's kind of third person removed. And so in that situation, that staff member would be okay to return back to work. And these are all based on TEA guidance and CDC guidance. Next slide. So we are continuing to plan for staffing. These 3 different boxes here, you know, it's staffing, it's the health and safety, it's benefits and leave. And so we've talked a little bit about this throughout the night, but you know, we are going to have students who select online learning. And for those students who select online learning, we will have designated teachers for those students. We're also going to have, we may have face-to-face teachers that may need to switch to virtual learning to cover students who become ill in the classroom or have to leave the classroom for a short period of time too. So we will have those teachers that pick up face-to-face and virtual learning as well. we're going to be all hands on deck. I mean, as we go through this, it's going to take a team effort. And so when we think about the roles and responsibilities across the board at campuses and staff, you know, we may have instructional coaches, we may have librarians, interventionists, individuals like that that are picking up and supporting teachers, whether it's in the classroom or virtually. We may also, we know the complexities with attendance tracking. That's going to be difficult, especially with the virtual learners. And so we may have some paraprofessionals and office staff, secretaries, educational aides, picking up and following up with for kids that are working, that are learning remotely and helping with attendance tracking. We are going to be providing training. There's a lot of information that we're presenting tonight. There's a lot of information about staff health and safety. And there's a lot of information about COVID and wearing masks and PPEs and those types of things. So we're going to provide training, online training for staff and substitutes as well. And speaking of substitutes, we're going to do our best to increase the number of substitutes that we have in our system. We have about 230 substitutes in the system now, and we're going to be working to grow that number because we know that they're going to be a vital part in making sure this all works as well. And we still have that monetary incentive that I wanted to point out as well for substitutes that work 70% of the semester that we approved last school year. And so that's $500 in December and $500 in May. And so hopefully the incentive would be there for substitutes to pick up assignments and continue to help us out and support us through that. We are planning for a survey to go out and later this week with staff and just trying to get more of a climate of kind of where they're at and kind of how they're feeling about the upcoming school year and maybe kind of allude to kind of what accommodations they may need to begin the school year. Moving to that next set of bullet points underneath the picture. We got some help with terms of leave that kind of helps us out a little bit. And so some of y'all may have heard us talk about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And so what that act does, it actually provides leave to individuals that test positive or have to be quarantined as a result of the coronavirus, and also provides leave to individuals that may need to stay home and take care of those that have been quarantined or test positive. It also provides leave for daycares and schools that have closed. If you have children that are impacted by school closure or daycare closure, then it does provide leave for parents in that particular situation as well. Once we're through that leave, you know, obviously we still have our leave policies that are in place through the board policies, and that's policies DEC and DECA local. And so we have those policies, and that addresses state personal leave, local personal leave, addresses our extended illness bank, our sick leave bank, addresses FMLA, and as well as the Americans with Disability Act as well. And so leading into those American Disability Act accommodations. So we're going to be working with staff. We're going to be asking staff. We anticipate receiving information from staff regarding medical situations that they may be experiencing and concerns that they may have, and they may request accommodations. And so we have a process in place to handle those accommodations. And it involves conversations with the staff member. It involves reviewing their job description, their duties, asking them kind of what accommodations they need and why they need that. And it involves reviewing medical documentation as well. And so we will meet with those staff and we'll talk about accommodations, and we may suggest other accommodations that may better align to their needs that they have. And we also always encourage individuals to contact us. You know, if they got situations that they're concerned about or medical situations that are requesting accommodations, by all means, we ask for those individuals at all times to contact our benefits staff so we can work through those needs.
Hey, Todd.
You bet, you bet.
Quick question, and I know you kind of covered it, but I want to make sure that I completely understand, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people listening that, you know, we had the slide before where we had the diagram of all the different things that if, you know, this happens and this and all that, and that is wonderful. And then down here, the Families First Corona. So I think the question, in fact, I know it is because it's been asked, is a staff member has one of these situations and they're quarantined at home for 14 days. Does that go towards their sick leave? How does that affect the staff member? Is that
Yeah, so
just how does it work?
Yeah, so there'll be 10 days that they can utilize from the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And that's 10 days of pay. And so they could receive those 10 days. If they're out additional beyond that, then we'll revert back to those local leave policies. And they can use state personal leave or local personal leave or state leave to kind of continue on with the additional time that they may need to get to a point where they can return to work.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Todd, does there have to be a confirmed diagnosis for that, or just
No.
exposure, or just symptoms, or all?
Yeah, it can be symptoms as well. If we have an individual that shows symptoms and they have not been tested, then we're going to treat them like it's a COVID-related illness and quarantine them if they've got those symptoms. And they'll fall underneath that coronavirus response.
Okay, thank you.
So is the quarantine time 10 days or is it 14 days?
Yeah, so that's a question Matt and I were talking about yesterday as well. So if you've been tested, it's a 10 days. If you coming somebody with contact with the virus and you haven't been tested positive yourself, it's a 14-day quarantine period. So if you have the virus, it's 10 days. If you've been around somebody that has this, that's been tested positive, then it's a 14-day quarantine.
Okay, thank you.
So let me ask this, and I know the meeting's gone on and everybody's tired, but I want to make sure I understand. So if a staff member, if a teacher, if a student came down with it, or an aide in the classroom, it doesn't matter, the teacher was exposed to that person. At that point, are we saying that becomes a 14-day quarantine?
Yeah, so I'd say it depends. So you go back to that close contact definition. And so when somebody gets tested positive, we got to figure out then, spend some time and do some what they call contact tracing, right? We got to figure out who that individual's been in contact with. And if they fall within that 6 foot and not wearing a mask, again, that is somebody that could potentially be quarantined. If they're wearing a mask.
If that teacher or aide, we have a positive on a teacher, and then we have an aide who was in close contact. If that aide goes and gets tested and tests negative, does that open the door for them to be able to come back at that point? I guess I'm trying to figure out how that works.
Yeah, so we would ask for medical documentation at that time. And if that medical doctor said that they're able to come back to work, that's something that we would consider.
Okay, thank you.
I think those questions speak to the nuance and the complexity of all of this. And I think it's just a really good point. I applaud Todd for working through this. But going back to real quickly, what we were told by TEA, remember, we have to provide face-to-face instruction for any student that wants it 5 days a week. And we have to provide at-home learning. But we also have to make sure that we actually have enough teachers to provide face-to-face instruction in the middle of all of these complexities. And so I point that out because I think sometimes people wonder why it takes so long to sort through some of this guidance. And I hope this serves as an example why.
So if a teacher, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now, so my question is, if a teacher tests positive, a teacher that's been in that classroom 5 days a week with those kids, what happens then? She goes out, is that classroom closed down? Somebody else take over? What happens then?
Yeah, so if the students are wearing masks, or if they haven't violated that 6 foot distance, then we're okay. If there's been that contact within 6 feet and no mask being worn, then we're in a situation where we're quarantining individuals, unfortunately. And so, and then we would isolate the teacher, and if it was in the classroom, we would remove the students in the classroom and we would start disinfecting that classroom as well. Absolutely.
This is getting way in the weeds, and I apologize. So you have students in the classroom, and the teacher is tested positive. Those students have moved around the whole campus. Now what? Don't have to answer today. I'm just thinking out loud. Now what?
Yeah, so that's a concern for us. I mean, obviously, through this planning phase, that's come up quite a bit, and moving kids around. Unfortunately, the guidelines that have been provided to us has been, you got to stick with that process map. I mean, if you've got a teacher that tests positive and there's kids in the classroom and there's the social distance that's not maintained, and somebody's not wearing a mask and within that social distance criteria of within the 6 feet, then we've got to take action, and we've got to isolate that teacher that's tested positive, and we got to protect the classroom as well, and disinfect the classroom before we can allow anybody to come back into there. Okay. So
Last question. I'm sorry, Chris. I keep jumping. Chris, jump in. So then I wonder about, so teachers positive, isolate the classroom. Are those kids considered absent at this point? Because now they're in quarantine as well. Or do they flip to like a virtual learning piece and they can still continue their education?
That's an excellent question. And they would flip, if we're quarantining them, then they become learning from a virtual environment.
Suzanne, our hope in all of this, and I think that's a really good question. Our hope is to have uninterrupted learning experiences for kids, no matter what their learning environment is. That is a tall task, as you can see from the presentation tonight, but that is what we're trying to create, because we know that our kids deserve learning to continue. There's a lot for us to work through to make that happen, but that's what we're working on.
As we move into this last information underneath this slide, as Mike Morgan mentioned earlier, we will self-screen, ask employees to self-screen themselves. And we've got posters posted around the doors now before you enter in, and asking for individuals to self-screen. And it's all those, they're looking for all those symptoms that we've constantly been hearing about, the fever, the shiver, the chills, muscle aches, cough, difficulty breathing, loss of taste or smell. So if they're experiencing those types of symptoms, we're asking them to contact our benefits office and contact their supervisor as well. Lots of staff safety guidelines that come into play as well. We've talked about the mask wearing. We know that we may have individuals that have some medical needs and have some discomfort wearing a mask. And so we will work with those individuals. We may offer them shields. We know from instructional purposes, it may be beneficial for the shields as well. And so we'll make sure that we have some shields available for them if needed. Obviously, the use of phone systems, instead of meetings, that's something that's being encouraged. And Mike Morgan mentioned as well, cleaning office equipment regularly, cleaning your workspaces, those types of things. So all those things are going to be considered and will be communicated with staff through the training that we do as well. And the last thing that I'll point out is our employee assistance program. It's really, really important for us to be able to communicate this program to staff, because we know they're going to be faced with many challenges and they're going to be experiencing many different things. And so, we may have staff that are coping with depression and all this, or grief, emotional well-being, stress, anxiety. And so through our EAP program, we can refer them to some licensed clinicians and individuals that will be better able to assist them and find out what their needs are and help them throughout all this. I'll open the floor for any questions.
Okay, so I've received a couple of questions about in-service and teacher training before school starts and what that's going to look like.
So Janet, before we jump into that, I want to say this. I hope our teachers understand that our guidance is changing on a daily basis. I would like to tell them that it's face-to-face, because I believe in face-to-face training and learning. I need them to know that our administrative staff are back face-to-face and working in an environment that is different, but trying to figure out what this face-to-face environment looks like. At this point, we can't guarantee them what that's going to look like. We know that we're going to be providing training, but we are planning for both Zoom and virtual options as well as face-to-face options at this point.
All right. All right. So a couple slides ago, right, your flow chart of, somebody reports COVID, right? Do we have, at least in process, similar flow chart for the response plan for campus, right? Like to get to some of Suzanne's questions, right? So, teacher has it, their teacher or aide or even student in the classroom, has it, kind of works through all those scenarios in a flow chart kind of format. Does that exist or is that in process?
You're talking about that includes the areas being disinfected and those types of things. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, right. Just to work through all of those scenarios, right? We're never going to catch them all, right? But man, we sure can identify a bunch of them ahead of time.
Yeah, I can tell you, and Mike, you can jump in and speak to this if you want to, but Mike's got a plan in process to be able to bring a team in and make sure that area gets disinfected and able to use just as quickly as possible.
Well, I'm certainly worried about the disinfecting, right? But just, to get to some of what Suzanne was asking about, student test positive or student has symptoms, then what, right? Like, so we have the, a version of the flow chart here for staff member, right? But what if it's a student, or what if it's an right?
So I
and
can tell you
that from a school.
Yeah. So I can tell you the student process is almost virtually identical to the staff process.
Okay.
I'll jump in here too, because this is as we kind of delved into the TEA guidance and as we kind of talked through scenarios and situations, and we talked this through with Charlotte, and she's kind of talked this through with Bell County health officials and things as well. There could be scenarios, particularly maybe at some of your, to Suzanne's point about if you're at a secondary campus and that kid's been all over campus throughout the course of a day, or you have a teacher who's had 160 students through his or her room during that day, as there could be times where you might have to take a day and everyone learn from home for a day or two while you do that contact tracing and see where all that student was and see where, because you have to remember, prior to about last Tuesday, the big questions that we did not have answers for was, if someone tested positive, what was going to be the criteria used to determine who had been in close contact with that person. And then as TEA defined that for us, then we had to take the idea that sometimes it's going to take some time to do some contact tracing and try to figure out who was within 6 feet for more than 15 cumulative minutes without a mask, or who did get secretions without a mask. And that would be a person who at that point would be at risk and would go into the protocols. So it's very complicated, and it's going to take some investigation and some investigatory work by our health professionals and maybe even by some other staff members to figure out who actually crossed that barrier and didn't maintain the close contact barriers.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. And especially when you start talking about the middle school and high school levels and contact tracing, those numbers could start growing completely. So that's why the mask wearing is extremely important as well, to make sure that we're trying to control the spread.
Yeah.
I want to jump in, Chris, to your question about the flow chart, and not to minimize the complexities that Mike was laying out. Just know that in addition to these text-heavy versions of these flow charts and these protocols, we are simultaneously working with health services and all of our departments to develop graphical representations that hopefully make it a little easier. And kind of show in other ways so that in those circumstances, it's a little bit quicker and easier to understand what connects to what. So we'll have both a graphical display of it and the text heavy version.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, and I mean, I'm so thankful for the process that has been followed and all the thought that's gone into this. And so what I'm about to say is not a reflection on any of the work that anybody has put in, because it's been a Herculean effort, right? I'm still not sure that I'm completely comfortable, right? And okay, I'm definitely not completely comfortable, right? And I think the situation we're in, the teachers, our teachers and our classroom aides and everybody that makes the school world go round, I mean, have been heroes forever, right? Since the beginning of the profession. And I think they, you know, our teachers especially, it's kind of an easier example, right? You don't get into teaching because you want to deal with COVID, right? You get into teaching because you want to make a difference, you know, in a child's life. Somebody touched you and you want to get into it. But I think the reality is our teachers are essential employees, right? You know, and sort of the time that we're in and the term and everything that means, like they're essential to our, you know, the health and well-being of our students. They're essential to the families that need to go to work and maybe don't have a place for their kids to go, right? And you know, and their kid being in school enables them to go to work, which enables the economy to function, right? And so this is so hard because we need our teachers to be a part of the solution and a part of getting us back to normal, whatever normal is. But we're doing it in a time where it's questionably safe to do it, right? And so, you know, we just, you know, we've done some great work. You know, we've got to make sure that we, you know, we can't continue unless our teachers are looked out for, right? And you know, because if we lose a bunch of teachers, well, then we can't do anything anyway, right? And so I don't know, right? I mean, there's been great work, right? And I know I've lost a lot of sleep over this. I know you all probably have lost more sleep over it. I just, you know, I don't know. I don't have a question, I guess. It's just, you know, I want the teachers to know how important this is, that we get this right. And we're working really hard.
Chris, we appreciate you sharing that. And we need you to know, we did not take that in any bad way at all. We share your concern. And I need to be really blunt with everybody about that. Jeff brought this up earlier, and I want to be really direct on this. The TEA guidance that was given to us does not make me feel like we adequately are addressing some safety concerns that I know exist in our community. And I want to be really direct about that. I think that there could have been other options that we could have been provided where we would be able to develop some kind of hybrid schedule so we can limit the amount of students in buildings at one time so we can better address some of the things that Todd brought up. And we were not given that opportunity with the current guidance that's in place. And so I wanted to be honest about that and let our teachers know we appreciate you bringing that up, but we share that concern as an administration as well. And we will continue working through all of this to make sure our teachers and staff feel well supported.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, is it worth us trying to take a stand like some of our neighboring districts have taken, you know, letter to TEA, letter to state government, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, we certainly couldn't take action on anything like that here. You know, I don't know how much it would actually do to change, right? But just as a letter of support for the greater cause, you know, I certainly would be in favor of that if something we would, you know, if that's something we would consider.
Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Schiller, is there anything else left on the HR
I
side?
think that concludes my portion. I think that last step is next steps from Elizabeth, I believe.
Matt, could I ask one question?
Absolutely.
And then I'd like to interject a comment here before Elizabeth takes over. And this may be for Mike. Mike, on the definition of close contact, when it says cumulative duration for 15 minutes, does that mean that someone can be exposed for 5 minutes and then 20 minutes later exposed for another 5, and then is that what that means? So it's not.
Yeah, it means that means with the same person. So yes, it's cumulative, meaning if you spent more than 15 minutes of close contact with that person without a mask, then you would be considered at risk and would have to go through the protocol.
Not 15 consecutive. Doesn't have to be consecutive minutes. Just 15 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And then just making a comment about what Chris was saying. I share a lot of the same concerns that he shares, and I want to make that very clear. Also, that the staff, administration, Matt, you and your folks have an enormous task at hand. And at the same time, I want to thank everyone who's presented tonight. Just looking at that, I mean, I feel like we're in good hands with the preparations that you guys are taking. This has been very comprehensive, well thought out, and all of you have done an excellent job in identifying the issues that we face, and then trying to come up with a solution to those issues. So I don't know what else we can do. Obviously we got to follow the law, but people that are listening to these presentations tonight, there's nothing wrong with them reaching out, parents reaching out to TEA, to your representatives, to Governor Abbott, to the powers that be, and make your opinions known to them. Personally, I think that things are going to change somewhat here in the next couple of weeks. What we're talking about now, we may be having a different conversation here in a couple of weeks. This thing changes like a chameleon lizard. I mean, we're just having to deal with all these things. So you guys have a huge task in front of you. It's not going to end, and it's not going to end anytime soon. So I really appreciate that, and I feel a level of comfort just listening to the conversations tonight and listening to these presentations. You guys done a great job. So
Okay,
thank you.
I just wanted to jump in here real quick as well. I know we all have our opinions about starting, not starting. Planning has been key, and certainly administration, you all have done a fabulous job. The very human side to this, the very human fact for this conversation are our kiddos. When the doors open and those kids return to school, particularly the younger ones, they look at those teachers, not just as teachers, but in some cases family. So they're going to want to hug and love on them and just be so happy to see them, but in this COVID-19 world, we can't do that. And so how do you tell a teacher who's loved on her children all this time, your children, my children, that they can't do it anymore and they've got to be 6 foot apart? So I know this is not an easy thing, and beyond all the planning, I know that you all have thought about the human side of this as well. So I greatly appreciate that. And I absolutely understand what Chris is saying, what Manuel is saying, and I support that as well.
Thank you. I'd like to say one thing real quickly before we move on, unless anybody else has comments. And I think you've all said it very well. Regardless of where any of our community stands in their own opinions, our job, we feel, is to serve the 12,200 students that walk through our doors every day. And our job is going to be to create an exceptional experience for each one of them in a changing and uncertain time. And we are dedicated and committed to doing that. And I feel 100% confident in the team that's on this call, and also 100% confident in the teachers and administrators that serve our school district. We know that we have a lot to work through. And as Todd mentioned, a lot of individual cases that we're going to have to figure out, but we're going to figure it out together, and we're going to figure it out as a team. And I need you all to know how much we appreciate you and your understanding of the flexibility and the agility that we need to have at this time, because it is complex. I mean, we appreciate you as board members in supporting us through that.
Thank you, Matt. And while we wait for Rachel to fire up the slides, I have the concluding role before I hand it over to Dr. Golden one last time to go over some next steps. I want to say, in this list in no way encapsulates all the work that will be going into the next few days. Rachel, it's the next slide. But we did try to hit some high points that we thought would be of interest to both our board and our community. Tomorrow, we plan to deploy stakeholder surveys. We will be sending a separate survey to parents and a separate survey to staff as a part of our efforts to continue to seek feedback in this design work for our response planning. Parents and staff should expect to see those surveys in their email inbox by late tomorrow. I say late because we're also doing the important work of updating our Skyward systems, the systems we use to send out emails and communication to parents. So we're working with our technology team on that. Parents will be asked to complete a single survey for each one of their students. We really want to make sure that we're collecting feedback about each one of their students' specific needs. As Matt mentioned earlier, these surveys are intended to collect feedback to inform the planning, but the responses are in no way a commitment or an opt-in or anything like that at this point. You'll see where that comes in later if current published guidance continues. Then the next item is the 20th regular board meeting. No doubt there'll be topics related to this evening's response planning on your agenda, but thanks to the committed leaders and staff in Belton ISD, there are items non-COVID related that we look forward to bringing forward for your consideration on the 20th. Work is continuing. July 21st and 22nd, we're working rapidly to plan some really important community live feedback events. Live obviously means we're going to utilize Zoom to share information, collect feedback, and ensure that we have the benefit of additional voices as we solidify those comprehensive details as a part of our plan with our design team. Look for more information once we get those all scheduled and we get the Zoom meeting links ready to register to be sent to emails and posted on our website. The 23rd will bring back the design planning team that has really gotten us to this point to review the survey and feedback data that we're going to collect through those events. Just as we have throughout the process, district and campus department leaders will review that feedback and incorporate it, make sure that we have the voice of all of our stakeholders as we further advance this planning. July 24th, that's a really quick turnaround time that's given a lot of us reasons to worry about sleep, but we know that our community is looking for that comprehensive plan to be released. So it'll be a little bit of light reading that will be posted or linked out on our website for our community to be able to consume. Next, that July 27th through August 4th at-home registration window under the current published guidance from TEA. This is when we envision that we'll be asking parents to share with us their intent to begin the school year through at-home learning, or if they intend to send their student to be at school with us or on campus to begin the year with us. This registration or commitment will go through our Skyward system that parents are used to when they're registering with us. And if we advance this part of our plan, we will be sure to send out communication through all of our different avenues. That final section is August 3rd through 18th. Once we have those comprehensive plan details, we look forward to being able to provide those informative graphics and videos and additional web content and other communication deliverables that will hopefully help better inform our students, staff, families, and community about the various components of our response planning. As much as we'd love everyone to read all the complex details, we do appreciate the need to make it more consumable. And just today, our team finished and sent off to print informational label stickers that will be applied to those large hand sanitizer dispensers. That's the level of detail that we're getting at thinking of ways that we're going to deliver information and those helpful hygiene and prevention and mitigation reminders. And Chris, I want to echo what Mike and Matt said, and thanks for your suggestion on informational videos. Those are definitely in the works. Our team also really appreciated the board participating in video opportunities this past spring. So do know that our wheels are turning on how we can incorporate your voices and your home video selfie skills to help us in getting out some of those really important messages that we need to share with our community. So again, Dr. Golden.
So Elizabeth, so I heard you say we'll be surveying parents, stakeholders, those kind of things. Are we doing any student surveys at all?
We don't have that survey ready to fire out tomorrow along with it, but that we are considering several different ways to collect student voice. We know within our system that we have the ability to send an actual survey link to our secondary students. And those conversations are being had right now, what that could look like. But I think I'm going to go out on a limb. Y'all know Matt is even if it's Zoom, he's a face-to-face kind of feedback collector. So we'll be looking for ways to actually kind of get students engaged and signing up. So parents should be on the lookout for that, because it is something we are actively working on. Yes, ma'am.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, our final slide is taking us right back to where we started, and that is with our values. And so we're ending tonight's presentation with our commitment to continuing to provide clarity as this situation and our planning evolves. We're going to continue to plan thoughtfully as we gather feedback from our stakeholders, and we use that feedback as we continue to enhance these plans. And we continue to be unified in our purpose to provide exceptional learning experiences for our students. And so we again thank all of the countless people who have participated in designing the systems, the processes, and the scenarios you've heard here tonight. A big thank you again to everyone who's giving of their time to participate in this incredibly important process. And thank you to the board for giving us this opportunity to give you these details this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. Dr. Smith, do you have something else?
I just wanted to thank you all as board members, and I did want to make 2 quick points to our community. First, there's been a lot of information presented tonight, and there's probably a lot of people sitting there going, so what's the plan? And I want you to know that I feel that way as well, as the superintendent. And part of that is because our guidance changes so rapidly. Hopefully the next step slide tells you exactly what concrete things are coming your way, and that we're engaging our community to make that plan, which I think is part of the amazing feel of the Belton ISD community, is we're partners in this. And so please know that those things are coming with an intent to partner to make the best plan possible for our community. The second thing I wanted our community to know is that our administration has been working face-to-face since July 6th, trying to make sure that we are feeling this out, and we're in the middle of all of this. And I also want to be really clear to our community that our board, it was not their choice to hold this meeting via Zoom. That was entirely my choice in all of this. And the reason being is that we have many moving parts, and we had a system in place for the Zoom meetings. And so we will continue to explore when the appropriate time is to bring the board back. But our board is entirely supportive of the administration being back face-to-face. And I know that they understand that we have people sitting there going, why are they meeting on Zoom if they're going to ask us to come back face-to-face? That was entirely my decision, and I need our community to know that. And we will work with our board to figure out when the appropriate time is to make sure we have a face-to-face meeting here. I also want to make sure that I say one more thing, and it's directly to our teaching staff. And our teachers, please hear us loud and clear. We value you, and we value your safety. We know that the burden of educating our kids has been on you throughout the spring, and we are working hard to make sure that you are put in the best possible scenario to make sure our students' needs are well met. And we are going to do our best, and I'm sure we're going to trip and stumble along the way, but we're going to do our best with you in mind and with our students in mind. And please hear us in all of that, and we will continue to try and work and partner with you to make this great for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. And just to your point about having those conversations with the board, we will be having those discussions for possibly returning in August. The board can discuss that at our meeting when we meet on Monday, the 20th, which will be via Zoom. However, we will talk about in-person meeting for possibly for the month of August, because we want the community to know that we support everything that is going on here. We know that there are plans in place to get our students back in person. And as a board, we want to get back in person as soon and as safe as possible, just like we would for our children. So that is a discussion in the making. Again, thank you all for all the things that you all are doing. Thank you for all the hard work and just remembering the human side of all the planning, and that's kids. So at this time, if you all have nothing further, we can consider ourselves adjourned at 8:09. So thank you guys.